You love podcasts, the stories, the laughs, the unexpected turns. But when this episode ends, the silence starts. Not anymore. Audiobooks.com turns that silence into your next great adventure. With over 450,000 titles, from bestsellers to hidden gems, your love for listening just found its new best friend. And because you already know the joy of audio, we're giving you 3 free audiobooks to start your journey. Imagine your favorite podcast, now with unlimited episodes. That's audiobooks.com. Keep the story going. Sign up for your free trial at audiobooks.com/podcastfree today. Because for podcast lovers like you, the end of an episode is just the beginning. That's audiobooks.com/podcastfree.
This podcast is brought to you by patreon.com/Talking Simpsons. Head there to check out exclusive podcasts like Talking Futurama, Talk King of the Hill, the What a Cartoon Movie podcast, and tons more.
I heartily endorse this event or product.
Ahoy hoy everybody, and welcome to Talking Simpsons, where our hedda gobblers are quite beautiful. I'm your host, the thinking actor Bob Mackey, and this is our chronological exploration of something other than The Simpsons. Who else is here with me today, as always?
I used to play a detective on TV. Henry Gilbert, hey.
And who are our special guests on the line?
I've got a Forrest Tucker quality, Drew Mackey.
Why do I have to be in the car, Glenn Lakin?
And this week we're looking at the Lookwell pilot.
Good, no calls to make. I'll just kick back and enjoy some television.
This pilot originally aired on July 28th, 1991, and as always, Henry will tell us what happened on this mythical day in real world history.
Oh my God!
Oh boy, Bobby, Everything I Do It For You by Bryan Adams tops the charts. A month in, and Terminator 2 is still ruling the box office, and Final Fantasy IV is released in Japan as AKA 2 in the United States a year later.
Mm-hmm. It was a summer of thieving princes and killer robots, and I remember it well.
Yeah, Terminator 2 I watched a million times. Robin Hood only once on VHS, but I heard that Bryan Adams song all of the time.
Now, I wanted to know this of our guests, too, because we're all similar ages. Did you watch Terminator 2 when it was a newer movie, or did you wait until you were more age-appropriate?
No one would take me, so I had to... My friend Antonio's parents rented it for him when it came out on video, and that's how I watched it. And I had to just, sit around like an asshole wondering what the movie was about because I didn't get to see it in theaters.
I think I saw it on VHS as soon as Blockbuster had it, but the Bryan Adams song definitely had more of an impact on my life than Terminator 2, because I remember making my dad continue to drive around the block until that song came on the radio again, and I just wept in the back seat.
You had such power in your house. I did not have such power over my parents. That's incredible.
Yeah, I was a bitch of a kid.
Okay.
How about you, Henry?
I listened to Terminator 2, I didn't see it until VHS releases. Back then was probably more than a year after this in theaters, but it came to be one of my favorites, especially because it was made to be the children's Terminator, because he has a cool kid sidekick in it.
Rated R, though.
Yeah.
So we all had permissive parents, because I remember at this age I was 9. I was not seeking out R-rated movies yet. I think my thoughts were oh, they're too scary and gross. And my parents were no, you'll like this one. Watch this one. So this was pushed on me by my parents. One of a few R-rated movies they wanted me to see.
And the most starstruck I was watching it was seeing Budnick from Salute Your Shorts in it.
Yes, yeah. I was that Budnick is up to something. And he was right. He lies to cops, and it taught us all an important lesson.
I actually rewatched it because of the last episode of our show that you were on, Henry, because Terminator 2 also features a very small appearance by Nikki Cox, pre-Nikki, and that was part of the prep for that episode, was going back and figuring out who the hell she was in that movie.
She's one of the littlest kids who's asked where the cop can find John Connor in it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And she is adorable. Also, the Final Fantasy IV, it's a really good one. I like it a lot. It's, though, of the numbered Super NES/Super Famicom Final Fantasies, it's my least favorite of the trilogy because I like 6 was my favorite story-wise, and 5 was my favorite gameplay-wise.
Henry, you ignorant slut.
No, he's right.
I played this one the most. I played this one the most. I think I've probably finished it at least a dozen times because it's a 20-hour game. It's so streamlined. I like the economy of it because with 5 and 6 you're sitting down to pretty big RPGs, but I enjoy them all. But I have a soft spot because 4 is when I started liking RPGs, when my brain had developed enough for me to enjoy them. I was 9. Before that I was like, what do you do? I can't move my guys. What's happening with these menus? But this is the one that it clicked with me, so I have a real soft spot for this one.
I think us too. I think we both really enjoyed it back in the day, but it's weird thinking about how many times I've played it in like all the subsequent incarnations it's gotten. Because they keep remaking it.
Now, I liked 4. I didn't love 4 because I just rented it because it was a shorter game. I could beat it in a weekend. But I played it after I played Lunar, the Silver Star, on Sega CD, which is a superior game to me, and that was my first JRPG. So Final Fantasy 4/2 was sort of like the lesser Lunar to me. I was a Sega household, sorry.
I don't understand.
I mean, Final Fantasy IV doesn't have a full animated opening with a song.
Or like a bathhouse scene, a hot spring scene.
If you look at the original Sega CD cutscenes, it's like an animated GIF.
Yes,
it's a picture, but the mouth moves.
No, in my memory, I replaced that with the remake, the PlayStation remake, fuller opening. And
in defense of other games that aren't Final Fantasy IV, they remake Final Fantasy IV too much. Only recently did Final Fantasy VI get a good remake.
Yeah, I mean, 5 only had one actual good one. I like Game Boy Advance 5. I think that's the good 5.
Then you'll like the Pixel remake.
Oh, and also, future Netflix superstar Jeffrey Dahmer is arrested this week as well. Yeah.
Oh, okay, really?
Yes.
Wow, he's brought to justice.
Yes, yeah, he's arrested, and how would he couldn't imagine that a little over 30 years later he'd be the star of many TikToks in thirst posts about the Netflix version of him.
And you know what? I see his glasses are coming back in style. The state issued I'm poor glasses are now on every hipster I see. Like I used to call them Jeffrey Dahmer glasses.
Wait, state issued I'm poor glasses? Is that...
That's a term that I made up. It's like, we'll get you some nice county dentures. It's just like, you apply for those glasses when you can't afford them.
Oh, see, I only associate them with pervs. I in my brain, they're the perv glasses, but maybe that's my own experience.
I mean, the state does create a bunch of pervs.
That's true.
You know, they just had that recent Netflix miniseries Dahmer, and there was a lot of discourse about that, if it was exploitative or not.
It was.
And I agree it was. And I like true crime stuff, but I sat down to watch it because I was like, I'm in Milwaukee. This is perfect. But the thing is, I know too much about Jeffrey Dahmer, so it was very boring.
Oh, right. I see.
I was like, this is taking too long. Come on, pick it up. One victim per episode? What's going on here? That's my own take.
It just made me feel gross. It made me feel exceptionally gross, and I like dark, gross stuff, and this was too much for me. I had to back away from it.
You sound like me in Marvel movies where I'm just waiting for come on, where's that character I know?
To compliment them, they got everything right, every detail. That's why it is excruciatingly long, and there's too much of it.
But anyway, that's what happened the day that this pilot aired, the only time it aired.
And joining us for this non-Simpsons Simpsons podcast once again, we have Drew Mackey and Glenn Lakin from Gayest Episode Ever. Welcome back to the show. Previously, you were both on to talk about Teen Angel.
Yeah, I love that you're diversifying our portfolio with more non-Simpsons shows.
Yeah, I like that we're associated with failures, I guess.
Well, this one didn't deserve to fail. And got much less content than Teen Angel.
Yeah, it did worse than Teen Angel, but is better than it by a good margin. You guys, we associate you with such great sitcom history that when we were going to dig into the last thing Conan O'Brien did before joining The Simpsons, I was like, well, then it's got to be with our sitcom historians, Drew and Glenn.
Well, thank you for having us. This is, much more enjoyable than Teen Angel. And I got to say, I never actually watched this until we were prepping for this podcast episode, even though I know it's been out in the ether forever. So I was happy that you finally forced me to take in this thing that was better than I expected.
You guys, recent episode I wanted to compliment. I really like the one you did on Martin Mull's character on Roseanne. You have lots of clips from other episodes of him and give a very detailed history of how they slowly revealed the gayness of his character in the show.
Well, thank you. That happened because I couldn't decide decide what episode to do, so I watched like 8 episodes of Roseanne, which sounds bad, but is actually very enjoyable to go back and spend time with this show that I've kind of pushed off to the side. And that is why that episode seemed like it had a lot more research than most do, because it was an accident.
Yeah, for a week, Drew would every morning show up to get coffee and be like, okay, so we're going to do this episode of Roseanne. No, wait, we're doing this episode of Roseanne. All right, I finally found the episode of Roseanne we're doing.
I'm a hard person to like.
Hey, the original Roseanne is a classic, and I'm thinking of doing a rewatch with my wife to show her this is who I am, where I came from. These are my roots.
You know, there's a lot of people who, like, this most recent one, the last one we did, everyone was still in the period of Roseanne being a scary thing that no one wants to, like, think about. And I think maybe it's been long enough that we can sort of go back to the original show and not have it completely spoiled by her. So this recent one went up, and there's a lot of people who pointed out, this is the only show on TV that showed me anything that looked like my life, and how meaningful it was to see people that acted like my family, sort of, and not get that anywhere else, and to be able to, like, admit to, like, enjoying this and having value in this now is nice for them, I think.
Yeah, actually, this is not a Roseanne podcast, but when I watched that show as a kid, I was like, oh, it's just like my life and my friend's life. But then later in college, I realized people had different growing up experiences, and when I told new friends, oh, I loved Roseanne growing up, and they were like, that show's depressing. So I guess what they were thinking is, imagine being working class.
You're worried after your mom loses her job? Yeah. Why would you be? That'll never happen.
Yeah, so not relatable to everybody, but it was to me.
Glenn, also, you know, how goes things these days in the world of television writing?
Oh, wow. The writer's strike is very beneficial for people's getting their steps in. A lot of tight writer asses these days. I probably eat better during the strike than normally I would treat myself to. Like, I don't have, like, burritos and pizza for lunch every day. But
that's eating better.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
okay.
it's more enjoyable. But, you know, Hollywood is always very exciting. And, you know, fuck the man. And the writers are sort of fighting for things that everyone will be fighting for eventually if they're not already, in that the money's all going to the top and not, as we were told, trickling down to the bottom. So, you know, fighting for not just fair compensation, but for a small sliver of the profits is going to be something that's coming to every industry. And of course, you know, the looming threat of AI, which is really just a plagiarism machine and not actual intelligence. But this is not an AI podcast, unless it is. I don't know. I'm not on camera, so I can't see if you're robots.
Yeah.
Well, it is, because this is a pro Zaslav podcast, and you're not actually talking to Bob and Henry. They're in Cabo right now.
Well, Glenn, I was curious. Have you gotten any? Speaking of striking food, have you gotten a free donut from Jay Leno or any of the other free foods we see in the photos online?
No, but I did get Little Caesars from the voice of Rocco from
Carlos Alazraqui?
Yeah.
Oh,
that's awesome.
Good.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
So it was really great. No one else wanted it.
This could be an old wives' tale I'm hearing, but have you tried to get a free meal at the Bob's Big Boy in Burbank?
I've not tried, only because, like, I don't even like driving to Burbank to pick it. I don't want to, like, spend extra time there. But I might, because I wanted to drive to Walmart this week, because the Lego sets for the Lego show I write for came out early in Walmart, and that's in Burbank. There's only one Walmart in LA, and it's in Burbank.
Make an afternoon of it. That sounds great.
And bleed Drew Carey dry just a little more.
Yeah.
But you do have to eat at that Big Boy, and we have done that before.
We have eaten. Yeah, Bob had a tuna melt. I had the classic Big Boy. Yeah. Which was funny because it's what the 50s defined as a big sandwich, or a big burger, but not today. But and I bring that up as well because this pilot we're doing here, Lookwell, is all about those less visually interesting areas of LA, the actual working actor, not just thinking actor, but working actor world of Los Angeles. And the Bob's Big Boy of Burbank is a part of that too, I'd say.
Now I feel bad that I've never been.
You should go. You might see David Lynch there. David Lynch is there sometimes, even today.
Well, what would I say?
Even today?
You can see the iconic Heat filming locations.
And you're right. Those are like not pretty LA, but that is the version of LA I'm most attracted to because it's the kind of stuff that you see in shows like the shows that Lookwell is like riffing on, where it's like we're filming in like Van Nuys today. And when you're just a kid watching, you think it's fancy Los Angeles. You don't realize that it's what it actually is.
Actually, Lookwell does tie into the strike because the character himself could not live the lifestyle he has without residuals, I'm assuming. And that is one of the things that writers are fighting to keep, to maintain a lifestyle that is not just living job to job in a gig economy.
There you go.
When the SAG-AFTRA is about to, perhaps might join you guys soon enough.
Fingers crossed.
That's what Fran Drescher said. I think she said a thing that wasn't as good before, but she
sort of stepped in it because she's like, well, the things we're fighting for aren't the things they're fighting for. It's like, no, it's all of a piece.
Well, if she does it again, she'll be out on her fanny.
This was a pick of mine because I thought, as we're about to start season 4 of The Simpsons, that's the season where Conan O'Brien joins the show, and it's where on the commentaries everything is about how much they loved working with Conan O'Brien and what a cool guy is. Now they all love him. And so I was like, well, before we get into that, why don't we look at the thing that he did right before? Basically, he starts on The Simpsons, I believe, September, October of 1991, and Lookwell as a pilot is officially dead by the summer of 1991. So if this had succeeded and gotten at least one season, then he would not have been available to work on The Simpsons, and obviously then The Simpsons would have been canceled because he was the only good writer on the show, and it got way worse when he left the show.
He personally wrote every episode. He drew most of them. That's what I've heard.
And secretly wrote on like 7 seasons of it too. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, it's. I think we covered the first one he's credited on. That's Brother, Can You Spare Two Dimes? So he was there to help with like the post production of season 3. But yeah, season 4, full bore Conan season.
What is his first credited writing episode?
Oh, it's New Kid on the Block. The to talk more about Roseanne. It's the Sarah Gilbert episode.
Oh,
yes.
Interesting. Okay. What an interesting first episode for him to come in on, because I don't think that is the sort of thing that we'd necessarily associate with his style of humor necessarily, but yeah.
Because it's grounded?
It's great. I mean, I see it now that we talked about it, but like I think everyone just thinks of monorail style episodes when you think of Conan on The Simpsons, right?
Well, we're going to repeat ourselves when we get to these episodes.
Right.
The story of him pitching his stories, his first episodes were he had monorail, and he was told by Gina Reese, that's too crazy. Brooks won't buy that. You need something grounded and about the family and real stuff. So then he pitches, Bart's First Crush episode, and then afterwards he pitches monorail, and Brooks is like, that's the greatest. And it's one of those many like Conan O'Brien success stories that make him sound cool, but also I kind of hate him for all his success now. I don't know. It's especially because he invented podcasts, and I'm just so jealous.
We owe him our livelihoods.
Yeah.
So I do realize Conan has been very successful, and there's a lot from his career that other comedy writers could be envious of, because he's just had like a very charmed existence. Is it weird if like on some level, and I think it pertains to this as well, I kind of always think of him as like not a loser, but like sort of an underdog, where like he's had a great career. Like I'm not trying to denigrate that at all, but like there's aspects of his public persona and the way that a lot of his projects haven't necessarily taken off like this. I kind of feel like there's like a patina of loserness to him. Does that make sense?
But that's manufactured in a lot of ways, especially if you read stories of him in the writer's room doing his pitches. I think having the affectation of like the nervous writer loser who's like spilling all over himself and stammering is like, that's a way he makes himself approachable despite his grandiose and success. And
so you're saying it worked on me, like
exactly. Yeah. And as a comedy writer who cannot act or be personable, that is something that I not resent, but absolutely resent. Like there is something that happened in the comedy writing world where they wanted more Conan types. They wanted people who could also perform, who were also giant characters themselves. And so, especially after the 2007 writer's strike, when writers' rooms got cut dramatically, they wanted to fill them more with people who were writer-actors or stand-up comedians, or as the Twitter got hotter and TikTok became a thing, people who were as comfortable on camera as they were in a writer's room, and to the weirdo losers like me who just want to write and not be seen or heard.
So you're saying that Conan is appropriating your
yes,
your losers?
It's stolen valor.
Okay.
And as we're recording this on Memorial Day, I'm going to compare myself to the dead troops.
That's completely fair.
We honor our fallen talk show hosts.
It is Conan's fault we have Colin Jost always on TV. Like that is he's cut from the same cloth. He's a Harvard dude, then became a top top writer on that. That's the thing. It's crazy. Conan was right before the writers got to be real actors on the show in these parts, like it's on SNL. But yeah, I have a little history of Conan pre SNL here and what take him to or co-creating Lookwell. Basically, he is a 100% Irish American man, born in Brookline, Massachusetts, to a very large family, gifted student, got into Harvard in 1981, joined the Lampoon, one of the only Harvard Lampoon guys to be elected president twice. You serve a year term, and he got it twice. And then the person who followed him on his second term, I believe, was Lauren McMullen, the great director of Simpsons and Mission Hill. And also Avatar: The Last Airbender too. So while at Harvard in the Lampoon, he would be classmates with future Simpsons writers Al Jean, Mike Reese, Jeff Martin, John Vitti, Greg Daniels, and George Meyer. Greg Daniels, who also like quietly has a massive media empire. You don't think of him as that, but it's like he also has a lot of I mean, he's not like, Two and a Half Men Chuck Lorre. He's not like Chuck Lorre, but he's...
I think if you add up all of his successes, he might have outdone Matt Groening, maybe.
I think so.
King of the Hill and The Office together.
Those two together are bigger than Futurama plus Simpsons, I'd say.
Right.
Don't forget Disenchantment.
I keep doing
You just
that.
said ugh when I said Disenchantment.
No, and it's good. It's fine.
Henry's gag reflex was positive.
Yes.
Hey, so weirdly, like Amazon targeted me with like a Disenchantment book. I think it's comics, but it's like all the stories that like you're not going to get on the TV show, I guess. And I was just like, what is this? And I don't normally get targeted emails from Amazon, but they're like, here's something you might like. This book that's coming out next month, and it's a collection of stories that apparently are not going to be on the TV show. And I was like, seems like they should save those for the TV show. I don't know what's going on there.
You should have bought it for me.
Well, Drew, I can explain this on our Lookwell podcast, but I'll take a second to explain this. They planned a Disenchantment comic series, and I think that is when the Bongo upheaval happened.
No more Simpsons comics.
And so Matt Groening started a new label to presumably publish those comics, but that never happened. I think because demand was simply too high for Disenchantment comics. They couldn't make enough, so they held on to them until the show was between seasons for a year and decided to announce 3 trade paperbacks. So there you have it.
Okay, that's interesting. Thank you for that.
And it's all original stories. I'm sure the art is good as well.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm not denigrating the quality at all. I was just
You're saying you hate all comics and comics creators.
I know. I think it's great. I'm a big fan of comics. I just thought it was, number one, weird to get targeted for that. And then number two, just wondering what the long-term lifespan of Disenchantment is. I was wondering I wonder why this would not be something that would just be absorbed into the TV show. But yeah.
Well, I'll tell you, the only time I've ever heard anyone talk about the show is asking us in the first week that it aired what we thought of it, and I've never seen any other discourse.
It's true. Yeah, I did see at the D23 Simpsons panel I went to, Groening did say, and we're working on more Disenchantment. And that was about 5 months ago. So, but anyway, so yes. Conan, him and his Harvard cronies, they're having a good time. He's viewed as like the funniest guy and a strong performer in a group of just nerds who like to write, their little Lampoon funnies. He'd also be remembered for even some fun pranks, including he pranked Burt Ward. Burt Ward came to the school to speak, and he brought his Robin costume with him. For a few hours, Conan stole the costume and dressed up as the Riddler to say that he was holding it hostage and then returned it. And of course, because this was a Harvard prank, no one was arrested or went to jail for this. Right. It was just seen as like, well, isn't this fun? Yeah. But of course, college ends for all of us, and Conan, post-Harvard, moves to Los Angeles, works for a little bit on the show, not necessarily the news, as well as he is trained in the Groundlings, which is where he first met and briefly dated Lisa Kudrow.
That's a lot of goofy, awkward, tall people in one relationship.
It's really, when he was finishing up his series on TBS, Kudrow came by and they reminisced about their first time, their acting time together. They didn't talk about their dating. It's funny. When I heard Conan on WTF and Mark Maron was like, oh, and Conan mentions Lisa Kudrow and Maron goes like, oh, and you two dated, right? And then Conan goes like, oh, right. This is what you want, right? The dirt. but they seem to be friends now. But okay, so then late 1987, he writes for a completely forgotten thing for Fox called the Wilton North Report, which was like one of their earliest attempts at late night. And he'd write on it with future Simpsons writers Nell Scoville and Greg Daniels, his old pal. When that show gets canceled very quickly in late 1987, he is hired by the man Conan himself calls a benevolent despot, Lorne Michaels, to join Saturday Night Live in the second half of season 13, which is when he would meet Robert Smigel. Now, we're so used to talking about Harvard guys that when I looked up Robert Smigel, I was like, oh, he just graduated from NYU. What's this guy doing?
Disgusting.
But yeah, so he's 3 years older than Conan, graduates NYU, moves to Chicago because he doesn't want to be a dentist. He wants to be an improv guy, and that's where you go for it back then. By 1985, he has a troupe that's so good it gets the interest of SNL. He is hired to Saturday Night Live in the Lawrence first season back, which sucked, and he was one of the only guys kept in the big bloodletting of like, oh, actually, you're not bad. Your sketches are good. Honestly, I view Smigel as like kind of the savior of the show. He was the best writer in those like rough pre-90s early years of Lorne returning to it. And of course, Smigel's a big SNL fanboy. He's a fanboy made good because that's why he is still so invested in propping up SNL as an institution, because he is a true believer. Though he also, there's some cynicism in there too. By late 1987, when Conan joined the show, they'd start writing a lot together too, and really start getting along. And this is where a writer's strike comes in.
Woohoo.
So they start writing together in late 87. By the spring of 88, that's when the 88 writer's strike begins. SNL is cut short, so what are these guys going to do? They're going to go to Chicago together and write a sketch show together too, called The Happy Happy Good Show, with Greg Daniels and some jerk named Robert Odenkirk, whoever that is. Some loser.
It's funny that with Conan O'Brien, the story that's passed around is like, oh, they got the Simpsons writer from out of nowhere, and they put him on the talk show and it just worked. It's like, no, he was a performer, and I think people don't know about it because that stuff wasn't filmed and shown anywhere.
Yeah.
I think you've said on the podcast that no video of that performance seems to exist online.
To my knowledge, no, I can't find out. You can find like one footage of like the troupe that Smigel was part of in Chicago a couple of years before, but not that. I did find the Tribune, the Chicago Tribune, has their old review of Happy Happy Good Show, and they think it kind of sucks. They're like, it's very funny. This is weird. These Bears guys, it's the home of the Bears. Like the Superfan sketch started there, and it's funny to see a Chicago reviewer back then is just like, and they make fun of the Bears and predicting the year 2000, whatever is going to happen there. But these things that we think of as the most famous recurring sketches of our youth is just tossed off as like, who cares? Writer strike ends. They go back to SNL, though Odenkirk doesn't follow them because he really hated working on the show. There's some great I hate working on SNL stories in his memoir, isn't there?
His interview story is great. Even he's surprised he got hired because he told Lorne Michaels, the show sucks now.
Yeah, and like, you're not as talented as you used to. Yeah, it's a pretty funny story. So Conan, he's working on it for a couple more seasons, and he's starting to burn out, though. And this is mid-1990. And the networks, as they often do, are looking for pilots. And surprisingly, this is before Lorne Michaels started like producing half of the shows on NBC. This is when he had only EP'd a few shows. But him and Brillstein Gray, the future home of Mr. Show, they decide that they're going to work with Conan and Smigel on a pitch for a TV series. So I credit a lot of this to the writer Dan Sneerson, who writes for Entertainment Weekly and did an interview with Smigel and Conan back in 2017 about how it was made. The idea started with Robert Smigel. He was like, I want Adam West to be the star of a Quentin Martin-style 70s detective show, but it's now, and he tries to solve crimes. Conan fell in love with that, and they immediately start pitching the story together. And it's crazy to think of like the stuff they're making fun of in this. It'd be like if, you took the star of Burn Notice and put him in a new comedy series.
I guess it wasn't that old.
Yeah.
I think this is a funny pilot. I would find it much funnier if I grew up with these shows. But it's still funny even without that growing up in it, but I feel like there'd be more for me personally.
Me too. Yeah. I had to Google Google every name said in this episode, except for George Kennedy, but that's because I was a Naked Gun kid. But also, though, when you watch this, too, even though Adam West adds so much to it, so many lines Lookwell says, I'm like, I can see Conan O'Brien pitching that line and saying it. I can just fantasize about it in my head. It's very, very specific delivery. But yeah, so they pitched the show to Brandon Tartikoff, who was the big NBC exec at the time. He's famous as the guy who gave Seinfeld some more chances instead of, isn't this crazy to think about? A show didn't do good in its first season, and they gave it like time to like find an audience.
And that season was many episodes.
Yeah.
And he did the same for Cheers too, which obviously is not what they do now with any TV show. Like you basically, the light spoilers for the third season of Barry. I love the joke in Barry of how the streaming show that somebody creates on it is given literally like 3 hours one morning to succeed or not, and then gets hidden by the algorithm.
And it does well critically.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But that's totally meaningless if the algorithm doesn't like it. But this is before the algorithm, like Tartikoff, Seinfeld, Cheers, Miami Vice, Family Ties, Cosby Show, Saved by the Bell. He has a lot of things he oversaw and sounded like one of the better execs of as far as network executives go.
Yeah, it was really, he's come up a lot recently for whatever reason in our podcast, and with all the anger aimed at Zaslav, it's really interesting to like imagine someone who's like the opposite of that, where he seems to be embraced by the people who were working for him, and they had really positive like relationships with him, and like most people when he's died very young, have like nothing but these great memories of him being awesome. So
yeah, because he wants to make good TV as opposed to just churning out content.
Right.
I think he was also the godfather of Punky Brewster, which is why her dog is named Brandon.
Yes.
Wow.
I just know this. I don't know how.
We did a Punky Brewster episode, and
that could be why.
He in fact had the idea is that he's the reason that show existed. He wanted to make a show about a plucky teenager, and then he named it after a woman he was in love with way back in the day, and then they had to go track her, the real Punky Brewster, and be like, is it okay if we call this show after you? And she's like, it's fine. Yeah.
And then Conan and Smigel in their interview had nothing but nice things to say about him too. They're like, oh, he actually really respected us and didn't give us a ton of notes. And he said Conan says when they pitched it to Tartikoff, he had the smartest thing they did not expect, that he said like, oh, people have been trying to make a new Get Smart for like 20 years, and it just hasn't worked. But I think you guys are funny. I'll give it a shot.
This is post Police Squad, which was, I think, a 6-episode series. And then also post Sledgehammer, which was a very Police Squad style show. I don't think it was as successful. When I was extremely unemployed, I watched all of it because it's on DVD, and it's very, very corny. It's a lesser Police Squad, but there's kind of precedent set for this kind of a show, but neither one was ever a success.
I didn't know Sledgehammer was a comedy. I assumed it was a straight like cop show or something.
No, that's the trick. That's and when they were writing the pilot for Lookwell 2, they only had Adam West in mind. That's all they wanted. But the network made them audition other people for it, including Max Baer Jr., who was Jethro on Beverly Hillbillies, and Chad Everett from Medical Center, if that rings a bell for anybody. But they eventually were like, no, it's got to be Adam West. They got their way. After working very hard on the pilot, they wanted a director who basically directed shows like this in the 70s. So they got, it's not a fake name, E.W. Swackhammer is the real guy, or Swackhammer maybe?
I think it's Swackhammer.
Okay, yeah.
That's what you hit somebody with. There's 2 M's. I'm saying it's Swackhammer. What a name. It's like Laszlo Panaflex.
Yeah.
They tell stories too, though, that television is more the writer's medium than the director's medium, and they basically tell these stories that, like, actually here I'll quote Smigel here. We didn't realize was that some of these technician directors weren't used to having nerdy young writers hover over every line, asking for take after take until the actor does it the way that they had it in their head. They say like, oh, that guy was kind of older, and I feel like we took years off his life by how controlling we were on the set as these like nervous guys under 30 ordering people around.
He did, in fact, die shortly after.
Glenn, also, too, like, you've developed some pilots in your day, or at least, like, script-wise, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, my most recent experience was trying to get an animated adult comedy onto Hulu, and had some successful writers with a deal try and get it over there, and had, like, a meeting with a a pretty like dude bro cis white guy who's like, a gay time travel show? Well, I don't know about that. Time travel's hard enough without it being gay. It's like, okay. this we'll see how this goes. But and also some animated shows over at Netflix at one point had like 6 different pitches, and then the great Netflix animation purge happened, and all the execs on it were fired or moved to different departments or waiting 6 months to be told what kind of stuff they can make. The problem with the algorithm method of making TV is that, and this is part of the writer's strike too, is that it's all based on these numbers that we are not given. So we know it's weird that for so long TV was sort of dictated by Nielsen, which is an imperfect science. And yet we have streaming, which you would think had perfect information about who is watching and for how long, but they don't like to give those numbers because they prefer to lie to both creators and their shareholders.
Well, all I know is that that Red Notice is the most watched film that ever was in existence.
More than Bird Box?
The
Gray
tied.
Man?
Yeah.
These are all real.
The Gray Man?
I want to correct myself. It's Swackhammer, by the way. So
Okay.
You're right. I added the M. I want it to be Swackhammer. It sounds better.
It's cooler.
It is, but his full name is Egbert Warnderink Swackhammer Jr.
Wow.
Hence EW, because no one's saying any of that. And yes, Drew, the Gray Man. Have you not seen the Gray Man?
I've not.
But
I've
everyone's
not,
seen
Bob.
The Gray Man 10 times.
I've
The
not,
Russo
Bob.
brothers, they're doing it again. It's like Avengers Endgame, but it's on Netflix. And Ryan Reynolds is in it?
Yes, of course. I mean, well, clearly at Netflix, the algorithm says everyone loves Ryan Reynolds and wants to see him in every movie.
In the next 10 years, he's going to ally with the computers. We have to stop him.
I mean, he's going to have to do it on Deadpool because he's not allowed to ad-lib.
Yeah.
And he's also a telecom executive too. I always forget that. And he owns a football league as well. And I say that in the European sense of football.
So we should be scared. We should be scared, is what you're saying.
Oh, very much so. Of him. Also the Russo brothers. I was reading the Hollywood Reporter had a great article about how Amazon Prime's TV shows make no sense. The way they're spending money. It's like at least $300 million for this Russo show that sounds very boring to me. And they didn't even They basically had to film season 1 twice because they messed it up, and it's costing hundreds of millions of dollars.
Well, that Lord of the Rings show cost like $1 billion to make, and the 2 writers behind it had never headed a TV show before. Mm-hmm. I mean, more power to them, I guess.
I watched that first episode, and it seemed fine, but I did not feel compelled to watch more.
Well, everyone's talking about it, so money well spent.
Yes, yeah. Okay, speaking of money, how much did this cost? About $2 million by their estimate. They filmed it from late 1990 into 1991. But this is where the first of many problems for old Lookwell shows up, which is on New Year's Day of 1991, Brandon Tartikoff and his young daughter are in a bad car accident. She has a rough injury that he is going to dedicate a lot of his time to helping her recover from. This is starting to lead to his exit of NBC. He'll start running Paramount, which then he'll greenlight the Wayne's World movie there. He's leaving NBC, and Warren Littlefield is taking over as the president of NBC. And as we all know about executives, no executive likes a project that they didn't start. Mm-hmm. Especially not one by a couple comedy nerds starring the old Batman. Nobody. Warren Littlefield isn't going to like that show. They finish their pilot, they turn it in, and they're like, bleh, they're like, basically, Littlefield not into it. And they decide that it's going to be burned off. And when Conan heard that term, that was the first time he heard it. And he literally thought it meant they were going to destroy the film negative so no one could ever watch it.
Well, they do that now.
Yes. Yeah.
They at least gave it the dignity of putting it on TV then.
They aired on July 28th, 1991, up against 60 Minutes with no promotion, and the East Coast airing of it is mixed incorrectly as to be unintelligible.
I want to watch that version.
Which Smigel says was that was the darkest moment for him. That he's like, well, maybe when this airs, it'll get enough positive buzz, and they'll change their mind. And then he turns it on, and he just hears it's the Dolby mix is all wrong. They fix it for the West Coast airing 3 hours later, but it finishes 92nd out of 92 shows that night.
So Henry, if you or I tried to watch this in our East Coast time zone, we would have been screwed.
Yeah, we couldn't have even seen it. Yes, yeah. Seemingly seemingly that would have been the end of the story of Lookwell, because basically back then, if it aired once, even if people taped it, where are they going to share it? Like, tape trading is best you're going to see. Maybe you could go on an IRC, and it virtually got no reviews. Like, Smigel tried to get a friend at like, I think the Village Voice to review it, but that was pretty much it. And so it would just join the, like, literally like hundreds or thousands of pilots that never go past anywhere, and that seemed to be the same fate for Lookwell. Compared to how things are delisted now, it's like, at least now, with ample piracy, if a show like Willow goes away, you can at least count on it being available the tomorrow if you sail the seas, as they say. Mm-hmm. Drew, you and I think, both have a list of some of the shows they chose to pick over this for the fall 1991 season.
Yeah, I do. I wanted to see what they thought would be a better bet than this, and there's one of them in particular that I think might have been a 1-for-1 situation where they had room in the schedule for one weird thing, and they picked not this in favor of another thing that ended up lasting for a season. Where do you want to start?
Well, I guess the one you're talking about there, I would bet, is Erie, Indiana. Mm-hmm. The only remembered one season thing that NBC actually put out that year.
Yeah. I did watch that.
Yeah, I think a lot of us did, because we were the exact market for this, and they probably were looking at the schedule and being like, what do you pair Lookwell with? Because you can't really pair it with anything else on their schedule at the time. And at the very least, this Erie, Indiana show is going to have an appeal for the youths, the weird disaffected youths, which we all were, and only lasted a season, but is still remembered today. That's the only, like, just looking at how they arranged everything for that season on NBC, I can't imagine anywhere else it would have fit except in the spot that they eventually gave to Erie, Indiana.
And there's a show called The Torkelsons, which is like a family sitcom that I only wrote down because, like, oh, it's a funny name.
Oh, it's good. It's good. So they that got a second season. They brought it back, called Home Again or something. So they had the show, and it didn't work. And then they sent the mom to marry someone new. And Brittany Murphy was actually on the second season of that show. She was like the stepsister who's like not from the country, and it was sort of like class conflict, like economic status conflict. And that show was actually really good. And people always ask us if they ever did a gay episode of The Torkelsons. I'm like, I don't think they did. But people, there's a fond memory for that one.
And they had a different show with an old guy from the 60s, James Garner, Maverick himself. He was the star of Man of the People, which was like him as like a local, like a local political figure who takes it was a sitcom as well. It also didn't do very well. And of the list of shows I saw on Wikipedia that were the first that debuted that year, the only one that actually lasted a while and actually still exists now is Dateline NBC. The first season of Dateline NBC, the spouse murder show that debuted in fall of 91.
So you become the pedophile hunting show, right?
It can be
it's both of those things.
It can be both.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
There are many days a week it used to be on. Maybe it still is. Now, to be fair to, is it Warren Littlefield you said the guy's name was?
Yeah.
To be fair to him, looking at this pilot in 1991 and looking at the viewership of television in 1991, I can see why you wouldn't greenlight this, because it is a single camera comedy, which I think we as Americans were not ready for until Malcolm in the Middle. It would take another decade for us to be like, okay, comedies can look like this. I also feel like it's way too subtle for NBC's audience.
It's very subtle. Yeah.
This really could have been a Fox show. And I also think that if this was picked up, I really feel like they would have reshot this pilot, because I feel like Adam West is who he needs to be, but I think the supporting cast is really weak compared to him, even though he is supposed to be the cartoon character in this realistic world. But I feel like he needs stronger characters to play off of, and I really feel like they would have done a different pilot if this went to series, especially that Jason guy. I'm sure he went on to do nothing, right?
You know what he did.
Yes, I know.
You know.
I know what he did. That surprised me. I was like, I've heard this name. I've seen. Oh my God. But I don't blame the executive in this case. He would have been the most forward-thinking guy in the universe if he greenlit this, but it would get one season.
Yeah, I mean, it'd get canceled in like 5 episodes, I'm sure. Yeah.
It'd be on Wikipedia, and episodes 7 to 13 would say unaired, 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 unaired.
For what it's worth, 2 of the other shows that they did greenlight for this season are The Powers That Be, which is a Norman Lear show that was co-created by the people who eventually went on to do Friends. And that got 2 seasons, and that's like Holland Taylor, David Hyde Pierce. It's a really biting political satire. Again, not going to work on any network in that year. But they also did Nurses, which was a spinoff to Empty Nest, and therefore part of the Golden Girls extended universe. That lasted, I think, for at least 3 seasons, if not 4 seasons, and was a minor hit, but now is completely unavailable online, except for like like the grodiest VHS transfer you could ever find on YouTube.
I still say there's like an untapped market for just recreating that Saturday Night like lineup that people could just like tune into like some sort of like internet channel and have that 2 hours of TV played for them with the commercials that aired.
That's a great idea. Let's do that.
But with the pilot officially dead, Smigel, he decided he's going to go back to SNL. But Conan, by his own admission, very burned out. His dream pilot failed. He had an engagement that ended, and then he doesn't want to be in New York anymore. This pilot brought him to L.A. He doesn't want to go back to New York City. It's the summer of 1991. It's the kind of thing that opens up a man's schedule for a certain animated show, but we'll get to that later. It is a pilot for Lookwell, but it also is a pilot for Late Night with Conan O'Brien because Smigel is the first head writer of Late Night. They talk about how once we got to have our own late night show that nobody watches, we could do this kind of crazy shit all the time and nobody would cancel it because they did well enough. So that's really where the legacy of Lookwell continues. How did this pilot become kind of get a cult status? I charted it a little bit, and one of it is in the intervening years at the Los Angeles pals here. Are you aware of the classic alt comedy bellwether Uncabaret?
I think I learned that from listening to your podcast. It was not something that I'm familiar with. Is it still ongoing?
No, I don't think. I bet Dana Gould will host one here and there, but
wow.
No, it's not ongoing. But they would screen this they would screen the pilot, I believe, taped off TV, or Smigel gave him a copy, and they would screen it there and talk with Conan or Smigel. And so that's how it sort of started to get to be known. If you're a cool alt comedy nerd going to stuff like Uncabaret, you'd hear about Lookwell.
Well, here's the problem: is we're not cool or alt comedy.
We're exceedingly lame.
We're also not 57 years old.
Yes,
in attending Uncabaret in 1992.
I never went to Los Angeles when I was 14, but even if I did with my parents, I don't think I could even convince them to take me to Uncabaret at 11 at night in Burbank. And you should consider too that like you said, Bob, nothing was like this back on TV back then, including it, because it didn't really air.
Again, I guess Police Squad was the closest thing to this. It was single camera, no laugh track, but it was also a massive failure until it became a movie later.
Yeah, and it is much more cartoonish. This is not this is one character is a cartoon, and everybody else is basically a normal person.
Right.
But many future comedy nerds would love it, including Jack Black. You can see Jack Black on multiple appearances on Conan O'Brien talk about how much he loves Lookwell, and he becomes a Lookwell superfan when talking with Conan. It would lead him to star in his own Lookwell-style failed pilot, Heat, Vision, and Jack. Written by Rob Schraub and Dan Harmon.
I think it also aired in the same place that this later aired, if I'm correct.
I think you are right,
okay.
Yes. So, dorks like me, I always wanted to watch it because you'd hear about it being this legendary pilot, but I couldn't track it down. If people who taped it off the West Coast airing in 1991 had uploaded it to torrents or Kazaa back then, I wasn't finding it. If you out there were able to see it, then please let me know. But it wasn't until 2003 on the equally esoteric and forgotten cable channel Trio, which
what are they up to these days?
I think they got bought out 5 years after this happened in 2003. But they created a programming block called Brilliant But Canceled for all the TV nerds out there. It's where you would see the 1997 attempt at a Fargo TV show, or the 2003 attempt at an LA Confidential TV show. And in October of 2003, that's where they finally aired the Lookwell pilot. That is the most widely seen version of it. Apparently, some Lookwell superfans say they had to replace some of the music in this, probably for copyright reasons, but I could not find specifically what music was or wasn't changed. Certainly, some music in this sounds like library music they just played. And yes, they're doing great. They've all, Conan and Smigel, they've gone on to massive success. Adam West always loved being asked about it. I've seen a few interviews where somebody goes hey, so enough Batman. Lookwell, what about that, huh? And also, Drew, you guys have covered Batman more than once on Gayest Episode Ever, right? At least once, I know.
Batman 66, we just did the one where it's about Batgirl, I think. Batgirl's introduction. Yeah, very, 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 very campy.
Yeah, it's. I was curious how much like what do you think of Adam West's camp of bona fides? Like he is a heterosexual man, but very, very campy.
Well, so I think he does it well, and he does it about as well as like any straight handsome actor guy can. The interesting thing that I wanted to ask you guys is like, is this where Adam West, as we know him, was born? Where he is basically commenting on his own stardom and like as a joke?
Yeah, I really think it starts here because he was after Batman, just like Star Trek, it kind of ruined those actors' careers. It's like, we'll only see you as this. You're a joke in every other role. He'd go on to do a lot of schlock. He's, of course, famously in Zombie Nightmare, the MST3K horror movie. And here, he's at least comfortable enough with what happened to his life to send that up. But I think that he still had a lot of dignity and pride. And then later, I mean, he'd go on The Simpsons and the joke was like, oh, he's an unhinged, out of work actor. Yeah. But then when they had him on The Critic, they wanted him to make a lot of jokes about his bad career. And he got offended. If you remember the commentaries, Henry. He's like,
yeah, that's right.
I don't want to say these things. Because like Jay Sherman's manager is like, oh, Lorne Greene is dead because they want to get Lorne Greene for the show. When Adam West hears Lorne Greene is dead, he goes, God, I wish I had his agent.
It's a really good joke.
Yeah.
I think that this is when Adam West, it happens. I see it as similar to what has happened now that our generation is old enough to make things and be the ones who sell stuff. That Conan's generation grew up watching Batman either originally in the 60s or they were 70s kids and they got to watch the endless reruns of it. And that's when they get to hire Adam West. I do think Conan brings it up in the EW interview. A big turning point for them too was that when the 89 Batman movie came out, a Revival theater near them was playing the Batman, well, I guess 67 movie, but the Batman movie that Adam West starred in. Okay. And when they played that, there was a reaction of like, oh, this guy's still got it, this guy's great, and Adam West was there. And I think that's what like inspired those guys. It's like now today you see like, here's a great example on OKKO Let's Be Heroes, which we all love. That they did an episode where they wanted the Rad character to have a different singing voice, and because they grew up with stuff like the Donkey Kong Country show, they're like, let's get the guy who sang for Donkey Kong in Donkey Kong Country, the cartoon show. And they just hire the guy. You get to hire the people you loved as a kid who hadn't been working lately. And I think the same thing with Adam West here, and that continues into the 90s. And then by the time it's played out, that's when Seth MacFarlane's like, oh, he's a regular on the show. We're going to just have him be like in like 7 episodes a year.
And then Seth gets Patrick Stewart to be a regular character on American Dad. So it's, these guys just hiring their heroes to be in their shows. And I don't blame them.
No, I do the same.
Yeah, I would absolutely do that.
I mean, I think a good example, it's sort of comparable, is Saved by the Bell, the new class, whereas taking a genre that we watched in our youth and both hiring the old actors but allowing them to sort of comment on the sort of material they were given in their youth, and also giving them work as adult actors that we love and want to respect.
Right, yeah, except for Screech.
Yeah. Well, he made that an easy out.
Yeah.
And it's worth considering again that Batman 66 in 1991 was 25 years old, which think about what is 25 years old now. And that's how old it was.
Phil Hartman's death.
I would rather not think about what's 25 years old, even though that is the basis of our podcast. That's very depressing. One
other thing about Adam West and worshipfulness of it, like in October 2016, right before everything stopped being real in America, I got to go to a cover the New York City Comic Con for Outlet This Sucks, but this was the best thing that I got to do at it, which was interview Adam West for like 5 minutes. And I could not have been like, I thought I was done with being a big fanboy for stuff like this, but I was like, you're Adam West, you are television history, you are like the best Batman who's not Kevin Conroy to me, and I love you so much. But I didn't want to my biggest regret though is I didn't mention Lookwell, because I bet he'd have thought what mattered to me is that he thought I was cool, and that if I brought up Lookwell, he'd know I knew more stuff than just Batman.
Tricking an interview subject into thinking you're cool is the entire reason to go into journalism. I agree. And yeah, that would have been awesome. I'm sure he would have appreciated getting to talk about something that's not Batman for 5 seconds. Yeah.
But he was very, very nice.
Yeah, and he's one of those guys we thought would be around forever, but he lived a very long life, but he didn't make it to 90, and he was still doing interviews. Like I think there was even another dead guy. He was on the Gilbert Gottfried podcast the year he died, giving a retrospective about his life.
God, I got to listen to that again. I think I did listen to it when it was new, but I got to listen to that one again.
I got into Batman 66 when the reruns were airing on FX, when FX was a brand new network. They aired from 4 to 5. They would air the 2 episodes that go together weeknights. And I was wondering, I guess it's a given that that's something they would have eventually put on at that point. But I was wondering if, and I tried to find if there was any truth to this, if the cult popularity of Lookwell had something to do with FX being young and hip and funky and sort of backwards facing, that might have been a motivation for them to put old Batman on from the very start of their network, and I couldn't figure out if there was anything to that or not. I do wonder, because the people who would have been programming this would have been young, cool, interested in what the Gen Xers are basically into, and it would have been something like this. And I do wonder if Lookwell is responsible for me having the experience with Batman 66 that I had.
Yeah, it feels kind of like how MTV would show Speed Racer in 1993. The popular entertainment of the 60s became subversive in the 90s.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the kids who grew up watching it as Gen Xers now, like how we say, those Nickelodeon shows were actually kind of fucked up. That's the same deal they had. The cyclical nature of growing up is going actually, Batman show, I've said it before, when I watched Batman 66 as a kid in reruns in the 80s, I thought, this is real and Batman is in danger I took the stakes as very high. I did not think it was funny until a few years of watching the show. I took it as very realistic for Batman and Robin.
No, I was the same, and there was one time where, because I'd watch it after school, and because they were 2-part episodes, so usually that first part would end with Batman in serious danger, and you'd only see him get out of danger the next episode. And the following day, my friend's mother was late getting us from preschool, and by the time I got home, I missed Batman, so I was like, well, I guess he died.
I saw it as a kid. I wasn't really into it, but then I saw it again recently. Speaking of kitsch and things from the 60s, I was watching it in a tiki bar. Okay. And it was just so distracting. This show has so much sexual energy that I was not aware of as a kid. It's just it's filthy.
Mm-hmm. I forget if it was Burt Ward or Frank Gorshin did a tell-all of saying that everybody was doing everybody else on the set, or like orgies on set, which I believe Adam West did not support those stories.
Frank Gorshin had orgies off set. He was professional.
The first episode I saw of Batman 66 has Ethel Merman as, I think, a 2-off villain named Lolo Lasagna. And I was probably 13, 14 when I saw this. And I remember being I don't know what gay is, but this is definitely something. And I don't want people to see me watching because I feel embarrassed about Lolo Lasagna.
Now, the campness of it, again, totally over my head for a while as a kid. Well, I was reading so many colorful comics anyway that I probably was well, yeah, this is just colorful. When you hit somebody, a sound effect comes out. This isn't funny. This is what happens in comic books. But that's the story of Lookwell that led up to Conan getting to The Simpsons. Why don't we take a quick break? When we come back, we're going to go through Lookwell, the TV pilot.
Yay.
The Simpsons will be right back.
Entertainment Weekly says Trio is the it cable network.
You can feel it, can't you?
It's pop culture TV. It's brilliant but canceled TV shows. It's live music performances. It's 9 sharp real stories from pop culture. It's Big Themed Month. And it's Classic Day.
What else, Paul?
Try us out with a sneak preview of Trio on Sci-Fi. The network premiere of Lost Highway, David Lynch's psychological thriller. Saturday at 11:30 on Sci-Fi. To get Trio, call 877-GET-TRIO or visit gettrio.com.
Welcome to the break, everybody, and we hope that you're acting like the thinking actor. And we really appreciate our guests this week for this slight side trip in Simpsons history. Thanks so much to Drew Mackey and Glenn Lakin of the podcast Gayest Episode Ever. They do such great work in their own sitcom history, research, and discussion. Everybody should be checking out Gayest Episode Ever and all of the great bonus materials they do on the GEE Patreon that they have as well. Please follow both of those guys on Twitter, too. All the links links are in the description for this episode. Thanks so much again, guys, for coming on to talk about Lookwell. And if you enjoy the Talking Simpsons podcast, even when it goes into deeper Simpsons history like Lookwell, you should know that this podcast is only possible thanks to the support of patrons at patreon.com/talkingsimpsons. If you were to sign up for $5 a month to help me and Bob do this as our full-time job, you can get not only the satisfaction of knowing that, but you'd also get a ton of bonus content, including every month a new episode of Talking Futurama and Talk King of the Hill, where we cover both those series one episode at a time each month. We are in season 4 and 3, respectively, Futurama and King of the Hill. And you'd also get access to a ton of episodes about Mission Hill, The Critic, and Batman the Animated Series. Over 150 of them and tons more if you signed up at the $5 level at patreon.com/talkingsimpsons. But if you want something even better than a firm pop, then you should head on over to the premium level at patreon.com/talkingsimpsons, because then you get all the $5 things I just mentioned, and then our monthly What a Cartoon movie podcast, where we talk about an animated feature film just as in-depth as we do a pilot like Lookwell, which often means talking for over 6 hours about an animated feature film like Toy Story 4, which we just covered last month as the start of our summer of Pixar. And at the end of this month, we're heading into the superhero world as we cover 2004's The Incredibles. And there's going to be tons more cool stuff there. And we've been doing the What a Cartoon movie podcast premium episodes for almost 5 years now. We have a huge back catalog, dozens and dozens of episodes you've not heard otherwise, of us covering so many films, not just Pixar movies like those, but also popular anime films like Kiki's Delivery Service or The End of Evangelion, 90s kids classic like Akira or a Goofy movie, and even some live action stuff like Little Shop of Horrors, and our longest episode ever, 6.5 hours, talking about Who Framed Roger Rabbit. If you want to learn more, check it all out for yourself at patreon.com/talkingsimpsons. All right, so we are back from break with the opening to Lookwell, which is a lot of just random scenes of Adam West. But I got to give him credit. They actually filmed original stuff for this opening instead of just using clips from the pilot.
Him defiantly ripping the police tape in front of him really sums up the show.
Yes, yeah. The makeup of the show this is a great 1990 SNL sketch expanded to 22 minutes instead of the usual 5 to 7 minutes.
Well, watching this, I was thinking of another show that was on around the same time, and that's Get a Life. It feels like a softer version of that because both shows feature main characters that are living in a world of delusion, but are unflappable and endlessly positive. And that's fun to watch.
Man, imagine if this ran as long as Get a Life, and how Get a Life, when you watch the fullness of the series and you compare the pilot to the last episodes of it, the pilot is incredibly grounded. So what if this was the grounded pilot of Lookwell, and then it gets really crazy by the start of season 2?
Now, I know a lot of shows change a lot from their pilots, even when the pilots are very good, like Futurama. Now, I wanted to ask you guys this. I feel like this is a very challenging show to write, and I wonder what they would have done after this first episode, because every time Lookwell encounters a situation, he's told no and to go away. And it feels like he constantly has to find new situations even within the scope of one episode. And the joke is his ruse never lasts long, but how do you build a season of episodes around that where he also has to unwittingly solve a crime? It feels like such a challenge to write beyond this one singular adventure.
I actually think that your comparison to Get a Life would have provided some clues how to make this show work. I think something that is working against Lookwell is that it's kind of very grounded, except for Lookwell. There's hijinks, but it looks real. So our ability to suspend disbelief of him getting into these situations all the time would be strained. And I think him being the silliest character in a otherwise realistic world does work against us as being okay, I guess he just stumbled into another crime ring again. But for this pilot, it works well. But how long would it have?
No, this is why Glenn's better at answering, because my problem with this pilot, which I enjoyed, was like, how could this work as a series? Because in addition to like he solves stuff accidentally, also the deductions he makes are routinely for the wrong thing, and that's like a nice 3 repeating pattern in the pilot. But would that be what the entire show would be, or would they have to evolve his like detection skills in some way? I don't know how to make that work.
I brought up the Futurama pilot because that pilot sets up a show that seems to be like a very fruitful show based off the premise. It's like their delivery team. But then by the end of season 2, we have Bender saying, "What are we, a bus?" They forget that they're delivery people because there was less life in that idea than they had thought and that the audience thought.
With regards to this, they said, they joked around over the years of saying like, oh, we're glad we didn't go to a series because we could never think of what more to do with it after the first episode. But in the 2017 interview, they were a little more hopeful. And one of the big ones they said was, if this became a real show, what they would have done is hire a professional mystery writer to help them at least like have a central mystery to every episode that then they build jokes around, which, because they admit that like the mystery in this one isn't the best like mystery as far as those go.
And the challenge is he has to be wrong and also right, which sounds harder than just writing a mystery. Yeah.
The alternative is, if you take the Futurama example, that like this is an entertaining character. He is in his own world. He doesn't know how to relate to everyone around him. You can send him to like the grocery store and he can be a weirdo at the grocery store, and there doesn't necessarily have to be a real mystery. Like watching this person be weird is enough. So I don't really care about the mystery in this. I just want to watch Adam West be like a strange weirdo, you know?
I mean, I think if it had just gone to series, it would have been more and more about the class and his relationship with his students, and they would have leaned on whatever like story or hijinks or romance or comedy or whatever they can get out of that class. I mean, Drew and I talked about this like just crossing paths yesterday about like how much the show reminded us of Barry.
Yeah.
And, you know, Barry's a show, you know, just ended, but over each season, it became sort of less and less what the first season was about.
What the pilot was. Yeah. They did move away from it.
When you know Bill Hader must have watched Lookwell a bunch of times.
He had to. Like, he's friends with Conan. He's a comedy nerd. He's a Hollywood nerd. It would be impossible for him to have not seen Lookwell. My personal theory is that Lookwell lived on in Barry, which is like a straighter version of it, but like has so much DNA in common with Barry. But that may be just me speaking of someone who just said goodbye to a show I cared about a lot last night and don't want... I'm sad that we won't have more Barry now.
I'm sad to see it go too. I thought it was a great finale. I've seen some people go and like, I don't think season 4 is that good, but no.
They're wrong.
They are wrong. We have our opening for Lookwell, and then it's time for a joke that they start off strong with a joke that back then I guess is just a Star Trek joke, but every show is Happy Days The Next Generation now. Like every TV show is that.
I mean, we to make a direct comparison, we have the return of that 70s show.
Mm-hmm. That 90s show, yeah, exactly. And they don't have a Buzz McCool yet on that show, to my knowledge.
That they renamed Kelso Buzz McCool. Actually, they need to replace Hyde, so Buzz McCool showed up.
Yeah, Buzz McCool was always their friend. There never was a Hyde. He's gone.
The fact that they are talking about Happy Days in the opening scene of this pilot is just another reason that makes me think about Barry again. But yeah,
because Henry Winkler is the Adam West of that show, for sure. Yeah,
and he also survived that, playing that one character for much longer than Adam West played Batman.
Right.
So it must have been an even bigger challenge to overcome, and a much more popular show too.
Yeah. And Fonzie is just as like an iconic look as Batman. Honestly, Batman, at least he has a mask on in that. But we all see, when I see Adam West, I always think Batman, mask or no. But yes, this is where we first meet Ty Lookwell at a typical, very boring Hollywood audition.
Yes, I learned a long time ago that a casting director only has so much time to make a choice. The thinking actor must use every edge to make that choice a foregone conclusion.
Well, I guess I blew it, huh?
Perhaps, but you never fail when you learn from your mistakes.
I recognize you. Aren't you Ty Lookwell?
Yes. But until this audition's over, I prefer to be addressed as Buzz McCool.
Well, it's nice to meet you. I remember Banachek. That was a great show.
No, I wasn't Banachek. That was George Peppard. I was Bannigan.
Brannigan?
No, that was Hugh O'Brien. I was Bannigan.
Oh, right. You had the black secretary.
No, that was Mannix. I had a sheepdog.
Right.
Sorry, people. It looks like we have everyone we need. But thanks for coming down. We appreciate it.
That's just great.
They're lost, my friend.
So as far as I know, Brannigan is made up for the joke, just because there were so many of these detective shows with a one character name.
Yeah, you hear about Banachek and Mannix, which is that is Gail Fisher, who was his secretary, and she's TV history because she was the second African-American woman after Nichelle Nichols of Star Trek to show prominently on weekly television. So a bigger deal than we remember Mannix for. But yeah, these shows never were in reruns when I was a kid, at least nowhere I could see them. Like these, I know Columbo is part of that same group of mid-70s shows, and it also stars like an aging actor from movies who then goes to slum it on television. Other than that, like I never saw Banachek. I never saw I knew Mannix for Mystery Science Theater references.
Yeah.
Like there'd be a music sting and they go like Mannix or whatever.
Mannix was on the crappy TV station that would just air whatever they could get their hands on, and they eventually swapped it out for Matlock, if that makes any sense. But Banachek is something I only know because of The Simpsons from the Treehouse of Horror 3 when Bart raises the dead with the magic spell. That is the only reference I have for Banachek outside of like this episode that we're talking about right now.
And these guys, George Papard, he was on the A-Team, or the A-Team had just been taken off the air around this time. And then,
it lasted that long.
And he was also first famous for Breakfast at Tiffany's.
Okay.
He's in that.
Well, I will say Columbo is the best of these. I'm an aging white man. I'm going through my first Columbo phase. And it's better because Peter Falk did not want to commit to a series, so it was just a bunch of movies that he did whenever he was available. So because of that, they spent more time on them, and the writing is much better.
I just finished my Columbo phase, so I feel you.
Oh, wow. That's quite a journey.
Yeah. It was a time. I needed it.
I was trying to think of another equivalent of it today, and I think that definitely it's a bigger show in popularity. Well, actually, probably its ratings are not a half of what Columbo's were 50 years ago. But the Yellowstone series, which stars Kevin Costner, like it is also an aging film actor, though he's older than George Papard was in the late 60s. I see it as similar to Kevin Costner, who also is referenced in this episode.
Well, one final thing, unlike Mannix and Banachek and Bannigan is Adam West's character name, they were making Columbo movies until 2003.
Well, there you go. Yeah, that has real staying power. I love every detail you hear about Bannigan is like, oh, this sucks. Like it was a sheepdog. You didn't even have like the
which is ripping off Columbo's Basset Hound, and it was only 3 seasons.
Yeah, that's so great. Like he's just short of being syndicated. I also love the way the guys reply to him with like, right, and of course. Happy Days, The Next Generation would not cast a 60-year-old man in the lead, but he shows up dressed as Fonzie and thinks his edge as the thinking actor is to show up in costume, which is that's not how you get an audition, guys.
One quick question about the list of TV shows he mentions. Brannigan is the one he says that Hugh O'Brien was on. That's fake, right?
That is fake.
Okay.
And Hugh O'Brien is like he did star in projects like that one, but yeah, there is a 1975 movie called Brannigan starring John Wayne, which seems to be cut from the same cloth as these shows. That also, like, F is for Family has their own Lookwell in it too. The racist cop guy in it, the cop show they're always watching.
Is he named after Reed Harrison?
Yeah, Reed Harrison's the lead actor. This is the name of the actor. Yeah.
But this sets up perfectly who he is. He's out of his luck on acting. He's way over his head. He's not going to get this role. But also, he takes the slop he does extremely seriously, and he's unflappable.
And he has to be like, he's the leader of the room. Like these actors who I'm sure did better in the audition than him, he is taking the professorial role of like, well, guys, like the way the guy says, like, I probably blew it, didn't I? Like, so Lookwell's already gotten in his head to think like, you did a much worse job than me. It's definitely going to be my job.
He's slightly pompous in a non-intentional way. It's just who he is as an actor, I think.
Yeah, he has to be that way. Otherwise, he can't continue to exist.
He lives in deep denial. That's his real superpower, other than his free time. I also love when he drives away. He says, remember, the thinking actor. And then he just drives off. Like he's not saying the thinking actor does this or some other insight. He's just like, the thinking actor. Yeah. Just remember that guy.
It's all about branding.
He doesn't wear the wig to the car. He puts it on the dummy head that he brought to hold his wig. Though now, too, I think that did you want it to go to a 4th season is kind of what they're talking about. He could have said the exact same thing about Batman. Like, why? I'm sure he was asked a million times, why wasn't Batman given a 4th season? It also only aired for 3.
I like his, again, more denial where he says, well, I thought the character had said all he had to say, and the network agreed.
Yeah. I mean, too, do you think if they pitch this, just 5 years later, they just be like, no, why are we making up the character Ty Lookwell? It's Adam West. This is Adam West, fictionalized version. Like, this is before Curb Your Enthusiasm and all that, but it would make more sense to just cut out this artifice and just be like, it's fictionalized Adam West who does everything that he does in this, trying to solve mysteries.
That was actually something I wanted to bring up at the end of the episode. Why didn't they just make it about Adam West? It would have been a lot more like everyone knows who Adam West is, and that would have been more of a viewer draw, I would imagine.
I think they felt they needed the kind of removal, I guess, or the distance from it.
I think honestly too complex for viewers of this era, where like early aughts, we have Curb Your Enthusiasm, and then also the Colbert Report, where it's like, well, it's Stephen Colbert, but he's also playing a character called Stephen Colbert, and they're different people. I think our brains had not evolved, our TV watching brains at that point.
Yeah, I think Ty Lookwell just needs to get much sadder than maybe Adam West is comfortable admitting that his life could get. Like, Ty Lookwell, like we'll see in the next scene, like, will eat popsicles on the couch watching himself, but I don't think Adam West wants to do the same thing watching Batman.
I guess that's fair.
Lookwell drives away with a small amount of respect for him because you see him driving this cool sports car, and then he instantly drops it off to a lot to take away from you any respect you had for him. Like, that he just rented that, and he's trying to get out of paying for it too. He tries to not pay $50, and then he won't even accept half price. He's like, I'll give you $20 and let's just call it a day. And then I think he never pays at all. He uses seeing the cops to be like, I better check it out. He never pays that guy.
I think he did skip out on the bill here.
Yes. but this is when Lookwell learns about a crime and forces himself into it. And this is another like higher level joke about this that I love. Every person he meets does not view Lookwell as being anybody to take serious, but the camera and the blocking of all these scenes do view him like he is centered in it. He is the star. You're watching the TV show that's maybe in his brain from the view angles he has.
I notice a lot of jokes with the filmmaking, especially when he's talking to a statue and we get reverse shots of the statue listening.
Yes.
Later in this.
But this is when Lookwell learns about a crime.
What was the license number, Mr. Alberti?
I don't have it. It's only written on the keychain.
What seems to be the problem, officers?
We're handling it, sir. Could you please step back?
I don't think you understand. I used to play a detective.
Oh, yeah. He was Bennigan.
No, that was George Kennedy. I was Bannigan.
Could we get back to this, please?
We'll do what we can, sir, but this is the 5th lot to have a classic car stolen this week.
Sounds to me like a string of classic car thefts. You boys better check it out. As Shakespeare reminds us, how oft the sight of means to do ill deeds makes ill deeds done.
Would you get lost?
Very well. I'll leave it to you, gentlemen, for now. And as for you, sir, it wouldn't hurt to be more careful about the kind of scum you rent your cars out to.
He says as he leaves from renting a car there without paying.
Another very telling scene about who the character is. You might be thinking as a new viewer, oh, he's kind of doofy, but maybe he has like a preternatural ability to solve crimes. But no, when they tell him it's the 5th stolen car in a row, he's like, oh, you've got a string of classic car thefts on your hands. He's just giving a synonym for what the man just told him.
Yeah. Yes. Another reason why the humor in this was probably too understated for the average sitcom viewer. Yeah.
That Lookwell has to be useless. Like, he adds nothing to any of these investigations and only gets in the way. Alberti is very funny. I like him as he's my favorite straight man of all the straight mans he interacts with. No, I like Jason more, but Alberti's close. Mm-hmm. And he's played by Bart Braverman. Several of these people, when I looked up their careers, I was like, oh, this is a Lookwell style career of this person, which basically when you go to their IMDb, they have like 800 credits of being like a one-line character in this or that. But this guy, still with us seemingly, he was a child actor on I Love Lucy.
Ooh.
That's how long he's been around.
Yeah.
And his full name is Bartley.
Bartley Braverman. So it's funny, this is full of like Lookwell style guys. Like this is really a tribute to the working actors of Hollywood who, when you see him, you go like, you like had a line in Seinfeld, didn't you? Which is also the African American cop in this scene is Riff Hutton, who the second I saw I was like, oh right, he was on Seinfeld, right? And he's a car salesman in that fake backdoor pilot episode that's all set at Putty's car dealership, where it's the one where George buys a Twix. I just remember that one.
As the Wrath of Khan joke in it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then the other cop is from Lost.
Oh well, here's the shows. I was so glued on Riff Hutton, I wasn't even looking up the other cop in the scene.
He plays Dr. Arst, who is like the complainer guy who gets himself blowed up with dynamite. He's that is who he's also been in a million things, but like that is the one thing I could see. So I'm like, I definitely remember this character.
And of course, Ben Again is also a fake show, but George Kennedy did star on shows like this, including one called Sarge,
and that's why he was in Police Squad, because he was sending up his old rules
at the same time as he was starring in Breath Assure ads, right? Or no?
Yeah, it was Breath Assure.
Okay,
the thing that didn't work.
He's like, hey, that looks pretty smelly.
I don't know that I would trust George Kennedy to have good breath. It's such a weird linkage for a company to hire someone for, you know?
I know. Talk about a man who you immediately picture what his diet is and what his breath must smell like.
Yeah.
Hey, if you want to see George Kennedy kind of as a hunk, check out Cool Hand Luke. He's a beefcake in that movie.
I do want to see that. Thank you, heterosexual Bob, for recommending this to me.
I'm suggesting to all the gays that are on this podcast, I know what you like.
You like
George Kennedy.
Yeah. If you like men eating eggs, then I have a movie for you.
Oh, many an egg is eaten.
Also, another like too subtle for people of 1991 joke. He only knows one Shakespeare quote. This is the one he says again later when speaking to Shakespeare. He is not actually a student of the Bard. He just knows this one quote.
Yeah, like I think it's too subtle because later in the show he says to Shakespeare like, "What a nice day," or as you would say, and then he gives that quote which has nothing to do with the weather.
Yes,
it's the one Shakespeare quote he knows.
That also feels like a very like Conan sketch writing scene of just or Smigel too. This also feels a little like Smigel is famous as one of the best writers for Adam Sandler movies, and this definitely feels like where an Adam Sandler crazy character says something to a normal person and the normal person says, "Would you get out of here?" Like, shut up, Happy Gilmore. That's why Robert Smigel is also a very rich man. I would bet if I were to guess who's richer, I'd still probably say it's Conan, but Smigel might be equal.
I don't know, on camera talent, they'll usually outrich you.
I don't know. Smigel seems pretty poor. I've seen the quality of his puppets.
And so yes, he drives off in his regular crappy car. When he heads home, this is when we get the only scene with his. It's funny, we heard about the black secretary, and here's his like almost like she's the one character that doesn't feel like a regular person. She seems also like a sitcom character in the show. Hyacinth, his maid. My guess is, but this wasn't in the EW piece, but my guess is that this scene is like notes from the like you guys need more recurring characters, so add a scene of him at home with his maid, and then on top of that you also get to see the idea of a young guy who would be a regular on the show that they haven't really cast yet.
A hunky young guy.
Yes, but this is where there is an amazing moment of her saying that they don't have the hairspray you were looking for, and he replies, "Those fools." It is a perfect line.
I wish there was more to Hyacinth, but she doesn't have a lot of screen time.
She's billed rather high in the credits, as if she was going to be like the supporting character on this show if it was going to go forward. But yeah, she really is there for about 30 seconds.
And it's also, I think it's a great addition that he has this instantly successful nephew who's getting callbacks from everything from all the biggest people in Hollywood. And when you hear at the end that he had to cancel that Happy Days audition, then that means that Lookwell stole his audition and showed up for it. Like, he didn't even get the job.
Oh, I did not even put that together until right now. That is extra pathetic. That is amazing. That was too subtle for me.
I read it as like there's a call about Spielberg, and the agent's like, you got to cancel that Happy Days audition. I know, big loss, right?
Yeah, I read
so
it.
It's like it's just worthless to him.
Yeah,
right?
I read it as
Yeah.
the nephew didn't even want the thing that he tried out for really hard. I don't think he stole it from him.
You maybe you're both right. I don't know.
But this is where he eats his firm pops, which are made to tighten the skin of old aging actors. I love all his little his tapping of his neck.
Yeah,
it's good stuff.
And I really wanted more sign gags in this, but there's just this little sign gag here, and I feel like again, if they were to make this a series, it would be a lot more heightened.
Yeah, as it stands, this sort of stands out, as the episode plays out, this sort of stands out from the rest in that it feels like a very Conan-y style joke, but the prop design and everything feel like they are slightly out of the world of Lookwell. Does that make sense?
I mean, this made me want a popsicle is what it did. And one of my 25-calorie Outshine bars with real fruit. That's,
Henry, I know those are 65 calories.
Oh, well, I get the smaller ones.
Oh, they have smaller ones.
They do have little, but they don't have the fruit chunks in it. So,
okay,
yeah.
I'm an Outshine fan. I like the chunks. Chunk me up.
They're good. They're good chunks. But though I would bet what they actually are using there is a Jell-O pop. I would guess if this is 1991.
And that will lead to the scene over the credits of him just enjoying a popsicle.
It's so great. How many times? I hope he didn't have to eat too many popsicles. He's 63. He shouldn't be eating too many popsicles.
Because he's 63, he should have as many popsicles as he wants, Henry.
It's easy on the teeth.
He's earned it.
You know who today is as old as Adam West is in this episode here?
J-Lo.
George Clooney and Eddie Murphy. Those guys are just
Wow.
as old as Adam West is now.
Going back to the popsicle, when my grandma reached a certain age, she was, on the way out, let's say. I love my grandmother. My mom was telling me on the phone one day, she only wants to eat cookies and candy anymore. And I thought, you know what? You go for it.
Yeah.
This is what you live to the age of 84.
If you're that old and you might as well take up smoking because you can probably beat it to death, you know?
Death would come before the cancer.
Just enjoy all the vices that you didn't have when you were younger.
It's prime popsicle time when you're 60 plus.
I look forward to the retirement full of popsicles for me too. But
you can have a Nancy Pelosi style freezer with just popsicles in it.
You know, another thought I had based on this system, what we cover on this podcast network is when he opens up his closet full of old tapes and pulls it off the shelf, I was thinking of the Gray Ghost on Batman the Animated Series.
That's a really good connection.
So that episode's written by Tom Ruger, who's definitely a Hollywood insider. I'm not saying he would have seen this, but he was more likely to have seen Lookwell when that episode was written in I think early 92 or maybe late 91. So because it aired in late 92. So I think it is quite possible he would have seen this and come up with the idea, except that, his Gray Ghost character has a lot more self-respect.
Yeah, that episode is about underlining the tragedy of this kind of a character.
See, now the inclusion of the nephew in the scene made me think of another failed pilot, Gloria Vane, which is, Drew's giving me a look. Because she had the niece come to town. She's like a aging actress. I believe the niece was going to probably steal more attention as a young new thing had the show gone on to more seasons. I'm sure
that is a commonality because it just is the sort of thing that would shove the knife into someone who is sad about their waning career. Yeah.
And waning life.
Both of them, yeah.
Sorry, here's two more celebs who are as old as Adam West was. Barack Obama is today as old as Adam West, and Jennifer Coolidge.
Oh, that's surprising about Jennifer Coolidge because I guess we've been aware of her for a shorter amount of time because mainstream discovered what a jewel she was fairly recently.
I don't know about that.
As it was Eddie Murphy.
She was a MILF 20 years ago. So
Eddie Murphy's been popular since I was born. So we've not known a reality without Eddie Murphy being a very famous person, and Jennifer Coolidge had until American Pie, and then even then we didn't do anything really great with her until kind of recently. So, but yeah, good for her for being Lookwell aged.
We're calling it that now.
So yes, we get to see what Bannigan was like back in the day, which it's funny just to see Adam West running around in a crappy wig, pretending that it was filmed 20 years ago, and he looks like Adam West now. Though he looks great. He does those firm pops are really doing their job. Then goes to an acting class, And I will say, this is some of my favorite stuff in it because in San Francisco, I took 2 semesters of an improv class, and this does feel reminiscent to me of being in classes like this, and how there's people in the class who are like the suck up in the class. There's the guy in the class who's like, actually, maybe I should teach now. And then there's the guy in the class who's like, what? Like, come on. Like, and of course the cutest girl in the class who gets hit on by the male teacher. All the things that happen in an acting class.
My only experience with these sorts of classes are this episode, and again, Barry. But there are like 3 of them walking distance from where we live that we could start taking classes at tomorrow if we wanted to.
Which ones?
They're all next to MoMed.
Got it.
Yeah, there's like a theater place like a few blocks from here, and they have black box theaters and like acting schools that people go to and apparently get something out of. It's really weird.
When I went to grad school for screenwriting, they tried to make us take acting classes, and it was just an anxiety factory because it wasn't acting. It was just like the exercises that go into acting. So I think, is it the Meisner? I don't know. The one where you have to like do like a physical activity while saying your lines from what you're supposed to have memorized. And the teacher would not tell us like what activities qualify. It was all of us guessing and being wrong. And the only activity he actually liked was someone balancing a broom on their hand.
So you're like, how much zip zap zopping was there?
Not enough
per hour in that class. Okay.
Not for what we were paying.
But of course, the point of Lookwell's class is to make people watch his show with him. Like, that's all his. I would guess every week is him just making them watch the TV show. And I love that they write an intentionally dated scene of him talking to Leron the pimp and arresting him, who apparently was funneling money through a disco. and that just him saying like, that's right, Leron, which is like, that is exactly the type of Huggy Bear type name that would have been used for a stereotypical pimp those shows back then also totally were about, in the Dirty Harry era of, hey, this is a white cop who's finally cleaning up the streets, and we need an older white guy to do it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, the best part of this class and showing that video is him then immediately like transitioning to being able to use the lesson from Brannigan to perform a scene from King Lear, as though the two were equal, or Brannigan being higher than King Lear.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then pausing the exercise to say, now, are they doing what I did in my Brannigan episode? The dichotomy, are they displaying that?
They get 3 lines out, too, and he instantly stops them. And yes, we joked about it before, but this is the first time where we see the standout of the class, who is the one guy who does not believe in Lookwell, Todd Field, who's very famous now as a filmmaker. He's the director of In the Bedroom and Tar.
We're big Tar heads.
And he's also the piano player in Eyes Wide Shut. So this is a guy who has worked with Stanley Kubrick and also Aqua Teen Hunger Force, because he's the voice of Old Drippy.
Oh, he's Old Drippy. Wow. I like this character more than the other supporting cast because he is kind of the Superintendent Chalmers of the show, in that he does not accept the reality he's stuck in and is just confused and upset by people playing along with Lookwell.
All the cuts to him of just like, what? Like, and then also you get to see Lookwell is like messing with his head every time he talks to him, because he knows Jason's gonna call bullshit on him, so he goes like, nice of you to catch up with us, Jason. Like, he's just insulting him the whole time,
even though he's pointing out that like the writing on the detective show was not clear enough for him to understand like what was the pimp doing. Like, the pimp was funneling money through the disco, and like he's just commenting on like the writing was not good enough for him to like understand that implicitly.
Also, I learned that apparently Todd Field, as a child, he helped invent Big League Chew.
Wow.
So the Big League Chew is, as you may know, is like, it's bubble gum that's all shredded up so that it can be a replacement for chewing tobacco. It was apparently him and some other, him as a bat boy and some other guy in the world of baseball took the idea to Wrigley, and Wrigley bought it from him, and that guy got money, but Todd Field didn't get any of the money from it.
Well, now he's got tar money. I bought that as a kid not knowing what tobacco was or looked like. It's just like, oh, fun gum shreddings.
Right.
It was fun.
It's fun until like you keep adding to the gob of gum you have in your mouth, and then you just have like a giant like sock of like purple in your cheek, and you're like, this is not fun anymore. I can't chew through it.
It was kind of like gum string cheese. Like,
yeah,
innovation.
See, I knew too well what chewing tobacco was because my dad loved it. He had a cup to spit into all the time. It was wonderful.
Tripping over all those cuspidors.
Oh God, I mean, I can still smell his pack right now in my head. Like I can imagine the scent of it.
Did anyone ever accidentally drink the cup?
Fortunately, no. But I think there was maybe once or twice where somebody, maybe me, knocked it over, or like, God damn, like, it is about as gross as tobacco gets.
Did he go, God damn it?
Nah.
If he sound like the angry Texan.
if he did, I've buried it deep with other memories. But but so yes, one thing they wanted to do in this class that they almost pulled off was that they wanted to have famous people in it. They wanted to have like revolving characters who'd appear in the acting class over time, and they thought it'd be a fun place to put like famous cameos. They said they almost got Marla Maples in the acting class, but yes,
wow. Too bad.
But yes, they then go through the acting exercise, and this is when it is instantly derailed by Lookwell having basically a psychotic vision. They even admit in the interview, they're like, he's actually like a sociopath. What happens here?
He also becomes Batman.
Yeah,
it's very Batman.
Clue.
Yeah.
Oh, my good master.
Prithee away.
'Tis noble Kent.
All right, stop right there. Which one of these two actors was conveying the dichotomy we saw in my Bannigan episode?
I thought Alex had a good sense of his who.
Worthy observation, Ben.
Well, sir, I was attempting to summon my life experience and transport it to the Earl of Kent situation.
Wait a minute. What did you say?
I was just talking, sir, about my technique.
No. Transport. Those stolen cars are being transported to another country.
Mr. Lookwell?
Sorry. Used to play detective. Mind can't help but make deductions.
It's a great musical choice. I like how it is creepy music that is sort of giving the effect of a man having an episode, but the brassiness of the cop show is kind of invading that as well.
Mm-hmm. It's very fun sound design, and that it's the word transport. Like this, see, if he thinks he's in the Batman show, and in the Batman show, he would say all this, and then people would be impressed of like, wow, you really figured it out, Batman. Like some of the funniest writing in Batman was when he would hear like one word, he'd be like, him deconstructing a Riddler riddle with just like, corn, and by corn it means this, and then he'd just make like 5 jumps to the revelation, and then Robin would be very impressed with it. But in the real world, the guy's saying like transport, and everybody is just disturbed. They're like, are you okay?
Yeah, I think is it with this one or the next one where Jason asks, "Are you okay, Mr. Lookwell?"
That's in the next one. Yeah. Yes. Also, it's very Batman that he's like, a little visit to my friends at the police station. Give them credit for not even trying to imitate the transition.
Hey, we saw that in Teen Angel when we covered it, right?
Holy shit, you're right, man. What Simpsons is to us is Batman to these guys, like to all of these writers. Like it's the same deal.
Except Simpsons is intentionally funny, and Batman was just rendered funny by passing time.
Yeah, I mean, guys like John Beatty, they eventually like, oh no, he's the funniest thing ever. Well, also, now I think about it, this is another great reason to do this one now. Season 14 is also on The Simpsons, where Adam West plays himself as Batman in like an old episode of Batman that Krusty was on.
Oh,
Remember
you're right
that?
about that, yeah.
Yeah, so even better table setting for our next season.
Synergy.
Hey, one more thing in the scene, Ben, the suck-up guy who always wants to like demonstrate how he knows how to do stuff. He is a gay guy and a writer who does really good stuff.
I didn't know he was gay. I saw he had like 30 Rock and Larry Sanders and Family Guy and the friggin' Comeback. Mm-hmm. I love that show.
Like a very singularly gay like comedy writing career where like I think it's informed a lot of the stuff he's worked on in an interesting way.
The Comeback is quite a gay show.
Gays love the comeback. I feel like gays
do.
don't always understand the comeback. Like, it is like there's a lot of people who use memes and like gifs from the comeback, and sometimes I'm like, did you understand that show was like a deeply sad show? But yeah, whatever.
The comeback is also a Lookwell style show. Like, she's the Lookwell on the show, like with her. But it's filmed like a reality show, so that's you basically end up with a reality show that's like on it. But and also Stu the bus driver from Pete and Pete is her husband on the show.
I love him. And what we have next is one of maybe 2 or 3 comedy cuts where he goes, "I think I have an idea." Cut. Someone saying, "No, no, no, go away."
Yes, I think I have the clip here, but I just love how the guy goes like, "You're a what? And you were on what? And you're a what?" But yes, he's only one cop knows who Lookwell is.
Right now, I'm going to pay a little visit to my friends at the police station.
Your name is what?
Lookwell. Ty Lookwell.
And you're a what?
I'm an honorary member of the force. This was given to me in 1972.
Presented to Ty Lookwell, TV's Brannigan.
Bannigan. Hugh O'Brien was Brannigan.
Who's Hugh O'Brien?
Exactly.
Honorary Crime Stopper, 1972. I don't know, Mr. Lookwell.
That was presented to me at a formal ceremony in Television City.
Sergeant, when they post the watch schedule, I want...
Detective Kennery.
Oh, I look well.
Don't worry, Detective. I was just getting rid of this guy.
No. Oh, Sergeant. He's with me.
Detective Kennery was the technical advisor on my show. Perhaps if you watched a little more television, you'd be better at your job.
Yeah, that's true of us.
Yep. Yeah.
That's how we get good.
Honestly, when seeing him show clips of Bannigan in class, I was like, how much removed is that from me playing clips of Simpsons episodes to explain them to like people on a live show?
He's doing a talking Bannigan live show.
Yes. Actually, that's exactly what the friggin' office ladies do. So they are living the Lookwell life. It's true.
Quite well.
Making a shitload of money.
They are much better off than Lookwell.
Jenna Fisher doing very well with that podcast, and I'm sure with all of her office residuals. But her husband just directed Guardians of the Galaxy 3 and got signed over to DC, her ex-husband James Gunn. And currently she's in my Facebook feed advertising a robot cat box. So what is success? Is what I'm saying.
I forgot they were married.
Yep, James Gunn and Jenna Fisher were married. But hey, I've seen how much it costs to go to her podcast live show. It's about 10 times more than what we charge. So
wait, how much?
Yeah,
I gotta know.
Yeah, how much?
Well, it was a Just for Laughs comedy ticket, so it was I think over $200. I want to say.
That's wild. Okay.
And these could have been Canadian dollars too.
She's very nice. They're both very nice people, but yeah, it's very hard to not feel a twinge of jealousy thinking about how much success they're getting from like reveling in their own work, basically.
The badge in Lucite, hilarious joke that he doesn't have an actual badge. He just has to pull, and he does it a couple more times, just pulling out a badge kept in Lucite, like, see, I'm a police officer. Honorary Crime Stopper.
Seemingly has the show's name spelled incorrectly on it.
Oh, yes, yeah. And also that the Conan says that he pulled this from real life because he had a grandfather who was a cop and he had a badge in Lucite. So believe it or not, an Irish police officer, his father.
They make those?
Yeah. I really love Ron Fraser's Detective Kennery. Though I think they could cast like a more famous dude for it, but I think he does fine. But he's like the one enabler and pitier of him, like that he from working with Lookwell, he knows Lookwell is a danger to himself, so he lets his fantasies go a little bit, but tries to calm him down. Like, I think we talked about this, Ty.
I think the hidden darkness is this guy thinks, if I don't humor Lookwell, he's going to kill himself.
Yes.
And I don't want that on my hands.
Yes, this is when Kennery tries to talk him down, and he's still, trying to be like, Detective, with all due respect, I did 3 episodes on this kind of thing.
Lookwell, those cars are imports. They'd fetch a higher price here than anywhere else. Now, we're fairly certain these thieves are altering these cars quickly and then storing them somewhere to be resold later.
Imported cars? Well, perhaps if the police were to share these nuggets of information with their honorary Crime Stoppers, we could work together more efficiently.
The commissioner wants to see you.
I'll be right there.
He knows who you're with, with, and he says he'd like you to join him in reality.
We'll talk later, Ty. All right?
Very well, then. I'll be out of your way. But remember this, gentlemen. I have a lot of free time.
Even when he is proven wrong, he still can't admit he's wrong. He's like, oh, well, it's because the cops failed to tell him what the imports are. This felt like another great misdirect. The cop comes back into the room and he says, "Sir, I just talked to the commissioner." And if you think this is a show where Lookwell's going to be built up more, then the commissioner would be like, and he wants to talk to you and Lookwell. But instead he goes like, and he knows who you're with. And he says he wants you to visit him back in reality. And just like the commissioner is telling him like, I'm going to fire you if you keep talking to Lookwell. Like I've told you, stop talking to this
People are
guy.
getting in trouble for talking to him.
Yes.
That line to me felt like the most, like, the closest to what contemporary, like, half-hour comedies were doing with their writing. Like, that felt like a sitcom line to me. It had, like, the right timing and the right structure to it. Just to say, he knows who you're with, and he'd like you to join him in reality.
It did. I like it's the joke. It's leading you down one path and then it jerks you in the other way. And that way, it reminded me of more like a Futurama line. They're like tricking you into you think you know where it's going to go, and then they surprise you with the opposite of that.
And so Lookwell leaves, but he reminds them, I have a lot of free time.
It's very boastful.
We then head over to what appears to be Musso and Frank's, or wannabe Musso and Frank's. When I last visited Los Angeles, me and my husband hung out with Drew and Glenn for an afternoon. Well, we ate at one of these like old Hollywood eateries, didn't we?
We did.
But it was COVID times, which was to eat outside and get burned by the sun.
And I still feel bad about that because like we missed on all the old funky like Hollywood decor inside, and then had to sit in the sun next to the street. But thank you for tolerating that with us.
It was very nice. I mean, hey, when we walked through it, when
we walked through,
we got to see all those posters.
When you got to use the bathroom, it's like, wow.
It was a hot day, I will admit. But
on this wall, though, it's all TV detectives. Did you notice that?
Yeah, oh, right. Columbo's on the other side of his shoulder.
Yeah.
There must be others too. Oh, that's great. Well, he very intentionally has sat next to his photo.
Right.
This must be his table. And I love how he's holding court over the people too. And that even Jason is trying to tell or Lookwell makes a weird statement and everybody else is just like, yeah. And he's just making a face like, what? Why are you, do you guys not hear what he's saying? But I just love how he says, the police are baffled, but they're too proud to ask for my help. I also like how he says, let's just say. He says that multiple times in this, like, let's just say. And in this case, he says he's going to do a little undercover acting.
Well, you seem to know your stuff. Why, of course. My father was a car painter, as was his father, and his father before him.
All right, this here's Manny. He'll sand the cars before you paint them.
Nice to meet you, Manny.
Hey, don't paint the bumper, man.
Oh, all right. It's all the rage in Minnesota.
Look, we got to get going there, fellas. We only charge $60 to paint these things, so we like to move them in and out pretty quick.
I'll bet you do.
Okay, guys, get to it.
Oh, Phil, if there's anything else you'd care for me to do, just let me know.
Huh? What do you mean?
Or, any special jobs that need extra attention.
Is he gay? Hey, it don't matter as long as he does a good job.
Just give me the signal. I'll deliver.
Look, man, we're not into that stuff.
That's not what I heard.
Wink.
It's too bad this is a podcast and we can't see the licking of the lips.
I think any other show in 91 would have called attention to his insane costumes, because anytime he has to go undercover, he goes seemingly to a costume shop and gets a very antiquated version of what he wants to dress as.
Right.
To be this mechanic or this car guy, let's call him, he's dressed like a Texaco employee from 1954.
Right.
He's got a little bow tie, a sparkling white jumpsuit, and then we'll see two more antiquated costumes later. It's a very silly idea that, again, I think is too subtle for 1991.
I like, my favorite part about this costume is that is it entirely impractical for someone who's handling paint? Because you're just going to spill paint on yourself the entire time. Yeah, it's really good.
And he gives away the undercover bit immediately when he starts spraying the bumper with paint.
Yes.
But then he is not worried at all. It's like, oh, that's what what they do in Minnesota.
Yeah, all the rage in Minnesota is something no one ever says.
And yes, it's funny for the gay joke in this episode that he's oddly progressive, or not, or unexpectedly progressive for a 1991 car mechanic guy. He's just like, it doesn't matter as long as he does a good job. It's like, but eventually, Lookwell, by implying that to them that he's heard they do have sex with men, that's when it's too far for them and they have to beat him up.
I think it's really
They
funny.
have to.
They didn't have to.
They have to.
They chose to. It's a really funny.
It's the best
joke.
cut of the episode.
Yeah.
Yeah. How'd you get beat up, Mr. Lookwell? Immediately, the next scene.
The working class mind is strange and unpredictable.
Then you find out he is pretending this is all part of the plan because he says when he was unconscious he rifled through their files, or when he so these two men beat him up until he seemingly was knocked out, and then they walked away from him.
And then he rummaged through their files. And also, that he says that he says that basically he assumes I couldn't find proof of any wrongdoing, which is like, well, what files are you even talking about? Which would show but it's his way of convincing himself he didn't mess up like that. And Manny is played by Sal Lopez, who's most famous for being in Full Metal Jacket, so another Kubrick alum in this movie. And also he's been in 8 million other TV shows, if you look up his IMDb. And John Capodice, he has an Italian name, it's hard to say, but he is a memorable character actor who had an amazing mid-90s. He is in Independence Day, the first Ace Ventura, and Speed in quick succession.
Is he the bus driver who blows up in Speed?
I think so. Okay. I only remember him of the characters. I remember him. I think he's like a taxi driver in Independence Day, but in Ace Ventura, he's I believe Ace does butthole humor to him in the police station.
He's one of the cops who just had it up to here with Ace Ventura.
Yes,
I'm pointing to my neck. He's got a very working class character actor vibe. Cop, taxi cab driver, detective, any of these.
For sure.
He's got a bullock body.
He does.
Jason tries to tell Lookwell, this is when he tries to bring it back to reality. He's like, so it wasn't connected to the car. It wasn't connected to the crime. He's like, glad to see you catch up to the rest of us, Jason. Jason's trying to tell him he's wrong. He's like, no, you're wrong, Jason. You're actually stupid for not catching on to this yet.
This is when his self-delusion is almost like a Peggy Hill level thing. That it's almost like a Peggy response to someone who's trying to correct, and they're so into their own thing that they assume the other person has not fully understood the situation.
Yes, yeah, it actually is very Peggy Hill. And so this is when Lookwell, he's slightly a creep, though he's, by creepy acting teacher standards, he's not that creepy, with the beguiling Miss Royster here. Played by Deborah Richter is her name. Her biggest credit is she's in the 1989 Jean-Claude Van Damme Cyborg. Mm-hmm. And some of her most recent credits are acting in very unfunny conservative YouTube comedy videos.
Oh, that's too bad.
That have about 10 views on them.
No. Yeah.
That's not.
Hey, it used to be 9 until you investigated.
They're exploding on it. And now people are going to, I'm not saying the name of it. You got to dig a little deeper for this, folks. But
I feel like he is not being a creep. I think his own image in his head that is like, I'm a ladies' man. And he just wants to evoke that, but he's not following through.
Yeah, he's not making her do a scene where she kisses him or something.
And the extension of it is that he refers to her as being very beautiful, but there's another woman in the class who is not as beautiful as Miss Royster is, and she gets nothing, and she's just shit out of luck.
Although I think there is a double entendre with your Hedda Gobbler is quite beautiful.
Oh, yes. Yeah, that's true.
Hedda Gobbler makes it sound like a blowjob joke, right?
To me, yes. Yeah,
and not the Henrik Ibsen play that I read in high school.
Oh, I definitely had to Google that one. I did not know. So you're more, you know it better than me, Bob. You should be teaching the class instead.
I'm a real gobbler head. Gobbler Hedda.
And then Ben keeps wanting to show off technique in the class, but this is when Lookwell has another idea. Before I play the clip, I want to say the character Alex is the one who is very supportive of him. In this clip, he basically becomes Robin. He knows, to be the best suck up in class, he becomes Robin. He's like, you're right, sir. And he supports him with it. And the actor is Brian Bradley, who's most famous for being the butler in the fake Seinfeld pilot that they do when Seinfeld gets a pilot.
Oh, so 2 Seinfeld guys are in this. Not surprised.
But yes, Lookwell gets another idea.
Faster. Sir?
Fast. Race. There's an auto race in town, isn't there?
That's right, sir. The LA Grand Prix is here Sunday.
Car thieves. Outrunning the police. High speeds. Expert drivers attracted to Grand Prix.
Mr. Lookwell, are you all right?
Jason, how do you feel about portraying a pit crew mechanic?
What do you mean, Mr. Lookwell?
Let's just say that you and I are going to do a little Grand Prix auto racing.
No, you can't come in. You are not in the race.
Tell him I'm Dash Carlisle, world-renowned auto racer.
He's Dash Carlisle.
No, you're not. You're not on the list, and there is no such person. Now, I am tired of talking to you. Get out of here.
It was a good effort, Jason. You just need a little work on your physicalization.
Well, what do we do now, Mr. Lookwell?
Not to worry. Every good undercover man has a plan B.
Buddy, what? Hey, security! Buddy, what are you doing? Get up.
They're really ahead of the curve when it comes to cringe comedy, I feel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, God, the way he's like, when he says, let's just say we're going to do a little undercut. And he's like, it's supposed to be the setup for, they're going to see the racetrack, and you are locked out of the racetrack. And the character's like, no, you're not getting any fun here.
I think it's also great because the running comment of him going, let's just say I'm going to do this. And then he just literally does the thing.
Right.
I don't know why he was being coy. He's not being euphemistic about anything. He does what he says he's going to do. Sorry, Drew and Glenn.
Oh, I was going to say, this is probably as close as he gets to Homer Simpson moment of being like, I got a plan B, and it's just like off the cuff running physicality,
making a run for the fence in plain sight of everyone, and immediately getting thrown in jail. Yeah,
that is a season 4 Homerism for sure. Just going like, you got to catch me first and run off. Like, though also when he says, tell him I'm Dash Carlisle. That's when I thought, this is Roger from American Dad. Like, that he even has a name for his persona.
Yeah, he thought it. He thought it out. And I liked how the guy's response is like, "No, you're not. You are not that. You are absolutely not that. No."
I guess previously he was Buzz McCool, and now he's Dash Carlisle.
Yeah.
Right. He also tells Jason it's his fault, that like Jason is the one doing the talking for him, and then he's like, I'm sorry. He's like, well, you need to work on your physicalization more. Like, obviously my plan was perfect. You, Jason, you just couldn't hack it, but maybe next time. Lookwell easily gets arrested for trying to break into the place. We're seeing him in jail with 2 large men who are throwing Jason around, but it turns out that's all just an acting exercise that Lookwell was impressed upon the guys, which you guys living in Los Angeles know is one of your greatest powers in Hollywood, convincing somebody they're a good actor or could star in things.
Oh, have I ever done that? Have I ever used that in my advantage? I probably should try that, shouldn't I? That would probably work in a lot of convenient situations. No, I wasn't aware of that. No.
It's much easier in LA to pretend you're an artist and say, do you want to pose for me?
Mm-hmm.
Not that I have or would, but maybe.
I think you can do this, but trick people into doing trust falls. Don't catch them and then take their jobs.
When he says they have a Forrest Tucker quality, that's another person I had to Google. I need to watch more F Troop, obviously, since I have to look him up.
We just did a Ghostbusters episode, and so we had to talk about like the weird history of like the other Ghostbusters, and Forrest Tucker was in the live action Ghostbusters, which necessitated the real Ghostbusters being the name of the cartoon. And yeah, it was very weird to have this come up twice in a short amount of time.
And this is when Kennery shows up again to prevent Lookwell from being arrested, and Lookwell is not also in a very Homer quality when he's bailed out. He is not thankful at all. He is instead angry that a person even helped him. And this is another like classic Lookwellism right here.
Ty, I've talked to the track officials. They've agreed not to press charges if you promise not to bother them again.
Sorry, Detective. I was merely about to capture our elusive car thief in disguise as a Grand Prix competitor.
Oh, well, actually, during the race, 2 more cars were stolen.
So we were just wasting our time?
You never waste time, Jason. Time wastes you.
Anyway, I hope you realize now that this kind of thing, it just isn't worth your trouble.
Detective, maybe Bob Conrad didn't take his honorary badge seriously, but I do.
He always tries to roll every failure into seeming to be intentional, but I love how when Jason questions this, he has no response, so he just makes up an aphorism on the spot that makes no sense. And Jason just kind of just like is baffled, like, what does that mean?
And Kennery won't correct him because he's like, anyway, because he knows there'll just be a whole other ordeal if he corrects Lookwell on this nonsense he just said. And Bob Conrad, most famous for the Wild Wild West, the original Wild Wild West, not the Will Smith remake from the 90s.
One of our previous guests pointed out that he has a perfect butt, and he does. And if you Google a Robert Conrad butt, you can find the article.
I'm going to do that now.
Our guest wrote, a different Henry who was a guest on our show, wrote a piece all about Robert Conrad's perfect butt, and it is in fact a perfect butt.
Look at this. I'll save it for after the show. But so then we cut to Adam West having a chat with Shakespeare. Has to be partially a reference to Batman's Shakespeare bust with the secret button for the bat poles in it, right?
I did think about that.
I mean,
yeah.
I think the show is getting viewers used to how crazy he is, but this is when this man needs help because it's sort of like the idea, and we saw it in The Simpsons, like you go to the monument to get inspiration. Mm-hmm. Maybe you're not talking out loud, but just like, I find so much inspiration from this figure. But then it's like he's having a conversation with him. He's going over the details of the case with a statue. And like I said earlier, we get reverse shots of the statue listening to him.
He's just lost in thought for this entire. I mean, they have to put time cuts in it because he's talking to him so long. And obviously this is a fake statue. I'm pretty sure they built for the scene because this statue obviously does not look like one that could actually survive outdoor weather.
Right.
So. Yeah, and my Googling did not show there's a real statue of Shakespeare anywhere in the Los Angeles area, though. Maybe I missed it in my searches. I don't know.
I think this is a studio lot subbing in for a public park, but I couldn't figure out which one it was. I tried to figure out where they filmed this, but I couldn't.
But what does Lookwell learn from Shakespeare?
Still, when all is lost, it's comforting to know that I can come to this place, think of your words, and sort out the puzzle. That is why we know the cars aren't leaving the country, yet none have been spotted on the road. Of course, Detective Kennery says the cars are being hidden, but how do you hide such unusual cars without attracting attention? Unless, of course, the cars aren't being stolen at all. Owners stealing owned cars, collecting insurance. Alberti's car rental. He didn't even know his license number. Follow Alberti, prove his guilt, expose the whole conspiracy. Oh, it's all so perfect. Thank you, William. As always, you've shown me the way. Now, if you'll excuse me.
I love the way he just runs away and jumps over a shrub.
That feels very Conan.
Yeah.
I can just imagine Conan O'Brien doing that. We then cut to something Hollywood still loves to well, actually, now the thing in Hollywood is to harass the unhoused fully and not even pretend to have a banquet in their honor. It's mainly, I mean, that's what, after Quibi, it was the main job that Jeffrey Katzenberg gave himself, was harassing the unhoused and making it more illegal to be in a public space with your property. We head to this, which is being run, this banquet that is being run by Alberti. Royster is playing Eloise P. Vanderhaven. She is totally in on it. You know what? She is actually having the most fun of any of of his classroom characters with him at this place.
And despite Lookwell being a method actor, I mean, that's what he says. He all he does is walk around telling people traits of what his character would be like.
Yes. The sidewalk is my pillow. Hello.
Nice to be inside.
And he's basically an Emmett Kelly style like clown, vagabond.
Well, he's a hobo. He's got a bindle and everything, right?
Yes,
he's full hobo. Yeah.
You know, this generation, Conan O'Brien, George Meyer, they all love hobos and bindles. They love it. This is when a vagabond questions him.
Good evening. I haven't a home. Hello, nice to be indoors. Hi there. The sidewalk is my pillow.
I just feel we have to remember, these are real people with real lives.
Good evening. Quite a little fundraiser, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Well, Mr. Alberti, pity about your stolen car.
Yes?
I don't suppose you'll ever see it again. Or will you?
What are you talking about?
Pay no attention. I'm just a crazy old vagabond. Now, if you'll excuse me.
Who was that?
How'd it go?
Well, I'm afraid. Alberti tried to play dumb, but he's no actor.
Oh, wow.
Jason's waiting outside. We've got no time to lose. Excuse me, homeless coming through. Pardon me, eat out of a trash can.
That is another like really good like sitcom writing line of these are real people with real lives, and then in walks Lookwell dressed as this ridiculous idiot. And yes, the way he is trying to get the information out of him. Though also, you know what, when he says, but he's no actor, it reminded me of another Lookwell type thing, which I love, which is the movie Galaxy Quest. I love that movie. It's where it's what if the Star Trek cast had to pretend to actually be the Star Trek cast. And the big move at the end of the movie that Tim Allen's character plays is that he can tell that somebody is bluffing, and he says like, oh, you know, it doesn't take a good actor to recognize a bad one. You're bluffing. And that's the same kind of way Lookwell is saying when he's like, oh, but he tried to play dumb, but he's no actor. It's like, no, you didn't get anything, Lookwell.
Really?
He gave you nothing.
Alberti's just confused.
What?
And like righteously exasperated that this person's now shown up twice and has just been like baffling as to why he's like interacting with them the way he is.
And also he's crashing the party dressed as a cartoonish version of a homeless man. Like seemingly mocking the very thing he's doing. Like it's so. And I love how Royster says to him when he says like, but he's no actor. She's like, oh, wow. Like she's so impressed. Like, yeah. So we then cut outside. Jason is, I think, actually working as a valet and not undercover. It's just his day job. And then it's also great. He's like, don't be alarmed. It's me, Ty Lookwell. I know. He knows who he is. And so, yes, in the real world, they do something that would get them both arrested and killed. They break into a car, and this also is such a like Smigel Conan kind of thing. He announces what his plan is, that he's going to hide in the back of the car for a few hours and see where it takes him. And that while he's explaining it, they are spotted and found out immediately. And he's like, Alberti shouts to them, and Lookwell's like, okay, new plan. Get in the car right now. We're stealing this car. We are stealing a car right now in front of the police, like with witnesses.
We are big fans of Miss Royster's line in this part.
With her opening it, why do I have to be in the car? Was my favorite line of the episode.
Not explained. She just has to.
Like, yeah, she just sat down in it and went with them. Like, yeah, I mean, Jason is definitely going to jail. I like to imagine that Jason did go to jail after this.
Do you have info on the scene that is not in the YouTube version?
No.
Okay, because I read IMDb trivia that they had to cut out a little bit to air this on Trio, which is the version that we see on YouTube, which I assume is the one you watched, Henry. There's an epilogue scene in which we find out that Jason and the woman were both arrested and are in prison, and the two Samoan men in the prison are now in the class.
Wow.
I like that.
That's great. Holy crap. That wasn't any version I saw.
But Trio cut that, so unless you have the recording of the West Coast feed that aired on this day, you're never going to see that scene.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Bob. I missed that one. And but as they're driving away, they're even being shot at. And even then, Lookwell, like, first he says, oh, it must be his friends following us. And then they're like, no, it's the police. He's like, drive faster. And then as they're being shot, like, we're being shot at, he's like, I've got it. I'm not a car thief. I'm an actor. Follow me.
He thinks the police are following him, with peaceful intent.
Mm-hmm. When they arrive at the dealership, this is when Lookwell, again, cannot be shaken in his rightness here. And it turns out he accidentally saves the day.
Sting operation.
The museum lot was targeted as a prime strike zone, and his car was bait.
Prime strike zone.
Oh, look, we don't have time to go into this. Hey, you!
This guy just crashed through my gate. How come the alarm didn't go off?
Oh, it must be a malfunction, sir. I'll check on it in the morning.
It's a brand new system. What are you doing here after hours?
Alarm system.
Well, I was just... me?
Yeah.
I was just doing inventory.
Wait a minute. Did he know we were staking out the museum tonight?
Sure. I told him.
There's your man.
Take him in. I bet these were all inside jobs. That's good work.
Well, Detective, I guess our little ride led you right to the criminal himself. I'm just glad my unique blend of talents could play a role.
In fact, if he was accusing the owner of...
Please, just let it go. It's not worth it.
Gentlemen, it's been a pleasure working with you. If you need me again, here's my headshot.
I love every bit of this, that his denial almost shakes when he's repeating the words back. He's like, he's starting to doubt himself. He's like, could I actually be wrong? Like, but though also I like when they arrive, he's like, I'll accept your apology in advance for arresting me, gentlemen.
I also, we're just pointing out things we like, but that's fine. I like when the perp is running away, clearly guilty, and he goes, well, there's your man. Yes. He's obviously. He
thinks he's directing the cops to arrest him when they are arresting him imminently. They've already decided. And when Alberti is thanked and he shakes his hand, like he is ignoring, Henry is ignoring Lookwell. He's like, hey, that's a good job. And then Lookwell's like, yeah, that's right, I did do a good job. Like, he's taking all the credit, and that they just have to go like, look, just let him have this.
That's why this seems so hard to write. It's very clever in this episode, but again, you have to write a mystery and then have to write a man solving it by having the completely wrong idea, but still arriving at the conclusion that a regular mystery episode would arrive at.
It would be tough to repeat.
Yeah, and not getting viewers bored on that idea of like watching him be wrong week to week, every week, and then accidentally being right. That seems like a tough draw.
So this is another thing from the Entertainment Weekly thing, though. They said one of the only notes they took from the execs' big notes was the executives did want Lookwell to win in the end, or to get a win. They didn't originally, in what their conception of the pilot is, Lookwell is wrong until the very end and has nothing at all to do with it, but they gave him the smallest win in that he does lead the cops to find the guys, like through his completely wrong actions. So they were told like they wanted him to get a win in the episode. That was a big note from the executives, and they took it.
I mean, I will say that the episode ends on like the strongest line note for this concept of being like, if you need my help again, here's my headshot. Like, that sums up what the show is immediately. So too bad it didn't work though.
And also he says, like how he says, my unique blend of talents could play a role like that. That's a very commercial line. And then of course the characters say like, what? We didn't do anything. And then over the credits, we get to see him eating a fruit pop again. So if you wonder what else they would have done in the EW piece, they actually did say other ideas they thought of at the time that they're like, oh, we could do episodes like this. Some of them were they would have an old rival actor from a competing series that was up against his, competing with him to try to solve crimes and annoy the police. Or him recruiting an old sidekick who is a Hervé Villachez type, they said. And also him going on a celebrity cruise and solving a mystery there. Those are just some of the ideas they had there been an actual season of Lookwell.
I like all of those.
I do like all of those.
I think it would have worked. Yeah.
Henry, you talking about the, you didn't do anything response to like him, like his unique blend of talents. Now it's making me think of that line from Marge vs. the Monorail with Leonard Nimoy, where he says he takes credit for doing something that he didn't do. And Marge actually points out, you didn't do anything. And he's like, didn't I?
And then he teleports away.
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, yes, that Nimoy in that episode is also Lookwell. Actually, the way he says, the cosmic ballet rolls on.
Yeah.
And the person next to said, can anybody want to change seats? Like they nobody cares about his stuff.
And like,
hey, Lookwell never aired. You can recycle the character.
Yeah. And hey, they both were very famous in 1966. Spock and Adam West.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But I think this holds up pretty well. But we've seen a million things that follow in its footsteps, and we've seen Conan O'Brien level up his style so much from here, and same with Spiegel, and really figure out the way to make this crazy character work. It needs to be Adam Sandler, whose natural lovability or likability does and charisma overwhelms the idea, and it works better with a man-child than a 63-year-old out-of-work actor, I think. Yeah,
theoretically,
at least commercially works.
Commercially,
yeah. For this, I mean, as much as I said at the beginning and the end, I don't see more material being mined from this character because it just seems so difficult and limited. I would like to have seen more of this, like a season, because I feel like the universe would have been heightened alongside of him, and it would have been a much funnier show. It just feels too subtle, especially for the audience. And even today, I wanted more sign gags. And Lookwell is the only zany character. We talk about Get a Life. It starts in the exact same way. Like, like you said, Henry, Chris Peterson is the insane person. But by the end of the show, there's just so many different insane characters surrounding him, and it makes the show even better because he's not the funny one you're waiting to speak.
Mm-hmm. I feel like if they had maybe picked a crime that was Hollywood adjacent, it might have carved out a stronger identity for the show. Like if it was like weird crimes that only could maybe happen in LA and LA adjacent areas, then maybe even if he wasn't great itself in the crimes, it would have felt like a place for him, a home for him.
That makes sense. I feel like the risk with that is always making it seem like too much of an inside joke. And we love that stuff, but doesn't play outside of people that care about the show business aspect.
Sure, but you already have a retired actor.
Yeah,
or not retired in his mind.
That's true.
Or maybe this would have followed a BoJack Horseman style idea of starting with this out of work actor who then it's just a journey through self-hate and depression instead.
Accurate description. Yeah, that's what that turned out to be.
But well, are you guys? I guess my last question to Drew and Glenn: Are you happy now that you have explored Lookwell and have added it to your television history? Are you happy that you've watched a little more TV as Lookwell has instructed us all to do?
I'm always happy to watch more TV.
Yeah, I've never really turned down the opportunity, but I'm especially happy to do this, see the limitations of this idea, and be like, this maybe wasn't like a lost classic, and it not being realized fully gave us a lot of Simpsons stuff that we maybe have more stronger feelings about. So that's a nice offset, right?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I feel that better sandboxes for Smigel and Conan O'Brien were The Simpsons, SNL, and The Conan O'Brien Show. Mm-hmm. Both for Smigel as a writer and Conan as a writer and host.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think you see a lot of the stuff that also would work much better not on NBC and in a cartoon. Mm-hmm. Also, they wouldn't be struggling with the budget or availability of people, and that they could just go so much farther as Conan would when he'd get to finally write on The Simpsons not too long after this episode of television was the lowest rated program of the night.
Yeah, there was only 92 shows airing that night. Or that week? I believe they said it was 92 out of 92 for the day. Okay. But that number it sounds more like it should be the week.
That has to be for the week. That has to like all the primetime stuff, everything. Yeah.
So thank you once again to Drew and Glenn from Gayest Episode Ever for being on the show. Another non-standard episode, but we learned a lot and we laughed a lot and we loved a lot too. Please let us know where we can find you online and where we can find Gayest Episode Ever and what's been going on with your podcast lately.
I'm on Twitter at Drew G. Mackey, Mackie, and our podcast is on Twitter at Gayest Episode. We're wrapping up our season. We're actually going to take a chunk of the summer off. We're going to be doing our new Patreon bonus series, which is Backdoor Pilots, which is a list of 10 attempts that popular sitcoms in the 80s and 90s did to launch a spinoff. Most of them did not take, but that our first episode of that is going to drop probably the week you get back. So
good.
Early June. So that's going to be the thing that's going to be running on the Patreon feed through the summer. And we finished up our other Patreon series, which is Weirdest Episode Ever, which is times popular shows went into genre in sometimes successful ways and sometimes spectacularly unsuccessful ways. That's all on Patreon.
I mean, I'll say you can find me on Twitter at I Write Wrongs, IWRITE Wrongs. And I actually, the show, one of the shows I write for, the only show I wrote for right now, because thank you WGA Strike, is Ninjago Dragons Rising. It drops on Netflix June 1st. It is animation. It is a continuation, but also a new start for the Ninjago series, which if anyone has a nephew, they are probably familiar with.
Ooh, I have a nephew.
Probably loves Ninjago.
I'll keep following your account, Glenn, too, just to keep up on what's going on in the strike from your neck of the woods. As well.
Thank you.
And hey, I wish you luck on getting Drew Carey to pay for a meal at Bob's Big Boy.
I know. I do love free food.
Can you get Drew Carey to pay for my tuna melt and send it to me?
Yeah, I think I'll keep.
I'm a supporter. He's got lots of money, right?
Yeah. I mean, Price is Right has to be paying a lot of dollars.
I think so.
Yeah. But thank you, Drew and Glenn, once more for coming back on.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
So thanks again to Drew and Glenn for being on the show. Please check out Gayest Episode Ever. But as for us, if you want to check out more of what we do and get these episodes 1 week at a time and ad-free, please go to patreon.com/TalkingSimpsons. Sign up for $5 a month. You get just that, but also a ton of other podcasts that you haven't heard. If you're not a patron, over 150 bonus episodes covering things like Futurama, King of the Hill, Batman the Animated Series, The Critic, and Mission Hill. And that $5 a month also gets you regular access to monthly episodes of Talking Futurama and Talking of the Hill. There's a lot going on, and the second you sign up, you'll get access to everything behind that paywall we've done for the past 6 complete years. It'll all be available to you immediately the second you sign up at patreon.com/TalkingSimpsons, and there is a $10 level as well. When you sign up for that, you can access the $5 stuff naturally, but you can also access one extremely long podcast once a month, only for patrons of that level or higher. And what is that, Henry?
Bob is talking about the What a Cartoon Movie podcast, our premium podcast every month where we talk about an animated feature film super in-depth, just like we do a failed pilot like Lookwell. And last month we talked for over 6 hours about Toy Story 4. We had a whole lot to say about that very interesting movie. And at the end of this month, our Pixar summer continues with The Incredibles, the 2004 Brad Bird film. And there is close to 5 years worth of What a Cartoon movies at your fingertips if you sign up at that $10 level, and you get all the $5 stuff Bob mentioned as well. That is movies from Akira to a Goofy movie. We have covered so many different animated films and even a few live action or mashup films in there, including our longest podcast ever, 6.5 hours about Who Framed Roger Rabbit. It's all right there at patreon.com/TalkingSimpsons.
And as for me, I've been one of your hosts, Bob Mackey. You can find me on Twitter as Bob Servo, and my other podcast is Retronauts. That's a classic gaming podcast all about old video games. You can find that wherever you find podcasts, or go to patreon.com/Retronauts and sign up there for 2 full-length bonus episodes every month. And Henry, how about you?
You can follow me on Twitter at HENEREYT. I'm always tweeting up a storm. And if you're following me and Bob on Twitter, please follow the official Twitter account of this podcast at TalkSimpsonsPod, because if you follow at Talk Simpsons Pod, you stay in the loop when new episodes come out on Patreon, on our free feeds. If we've got live shows, anything that we've got going on in our lives, you'll learn about it first if you follow at Talk Simpsons Pod on Twitter, and also at Talk Simpsons Pod on Instagram. And if you need an easy to explore list of all of our previously released free podcasts, head on over to TalkingSimpsonsPodcast.com.
Thank you so much for joining us, folks. We'll see you again next time for Season 14's How I Spent My Strummer Vacation, and we'll see you then.
Hey, Lookwell.
Hello, Hyacinth.
How'd that audition go?
Quite well. But these things take time. Did you do that shopping I asked you to do?
I tried, but the store said they don't make that hairspray anymore.
Those fools.